But, eraser, begin with a sentence that feels safe in your mouth. You did a great job. Now feel your tongue hesitate, preparing to smuggle in the truth you don't want to own. You did a great job, but... Hear what happens to the first half the moment the second half appears. The praise is not merely diluted, it is erased. The but acts like a switchblade in the sentence, flipping everything before it into a setup for the wound that follows. This is the but eraser, the tiny linguistic device that transforms compliments into criticism, agreement into objection, empathy into correction. We think we're softening the blow. What the listener hears is the blow. You've felt it 1,000 times. A manager says, your presentation was clear, but the strategy lacks depth. You don't remember the word clear an hour later. You remember the word lacks. A partner says, I love you, but you don't listen. The love evaporates like mist under a noon sun. A friend begins, I'm not trying to be mean, but, and you've already braced yourself. The content that matters lives after the conjunction. The polite preface is a decoy. Our brains are tuned to contrast. But marks the pivot, the moment when the sentence changes direction and the speaker reveals their real intent. The human ear learns that everything prior to the pivot was dressing, and the real meal, the bitter one, comes after. This is not pedantry. It is the architecture of meaning. But is a hinge word, a power chord in the grammar of contrast. It says, cancel the assumptions I just raised, here is the correction. Linguists call this a contrastive conjunction. Psychologists see its partnership with the negativity bias, the mind's instinct to register threats more sharply than comforts. Pair that with the recency effect, the way the last thing said rings loudest, and you get an amplifier for critique. Even when we mean well, but tells the listener where to place their attention, and the instruction is always, ignore the first clause, the second one is the truth. Watch how this plays out in your daily life. The corporate compliment sandwich, praise, critique, praise, fails because the but exposes the meat. Employees learn to treat the bread as noise and the filling as signal. In relationships, I understand you're tired, but you promised. Sounds like your tiredness is irrelevant, you're wrong. In politics, of course we care about safety, but freedom matters, or we support small businesses, but we need regulation. Both tell you which value is being positioned as the fix to the alleged mistake in the first clause. Even apologies fall to the blade. I'm sorry, but I was under pressure. That's not remorse. That's defense. The apology is erased and replaced by justification. Consider a subtler version. Yes, but. It sounds cooperative, like you're agreeing and then refining. In reality, yes, but is a velvet no. It nods with one hand while pushing away with the other. In creative rooms, it drains momentum. In negotiations, it broadcasts resistance. In mentorship, it converts teaching into dismissal. And because, but, arrives so quickly, 2 letters, a beat, it gives you the emotional hit of asserting your view without the hard work of integrating someone else's. It is fast, satisfying, and corrosive. There is a cost you can measure in trust. People learn that your first words don't count. They stop believing your praise because they are waiting for the turn. The space after, but, becomes a cliff they expect to fall from. Over time, they stop listening to your opening at all. You train them to flinch. You train them to defend. You train them to hear your voice as a threat dressed as kindness. Once that pattern sets, collaboration shrinks. People hide ideas to avoid the pivot. They undershare to prevent the sting. Culture cools, then freezes. If this sounds like a moral lecture, it is not. It's a tool lesson. But, is powerful because it is useful. It yanks attention to the conflict quickly. In emergencies, it clarifies. I know you're scared, but we have to move now. In safety briefings, it overrides habit. You feel fine, but take the medication. The problem is not that, but, exists. It's that we wield it unconsciously when nuance and care would serve us better. The very efficiency that makes it sharp makes it dangerous in delicate work. So what else is there? Replace the pivot with an addition. And. It sounds trite until you hear what happens inside your body when you use it. Your presentation was clear, and the strategy will be stronger if we add market depth. The clarity survives, the improvement doesn't negate it. I love you, and I feel unheard when I'm interrupted. The love stands next to the need, not above it. I'm sorry, and I want to explain the pressure I was under so you have context, not as an excuse. The remorse doesn't get erased, the context arrives as a companion, not a weapon. And does not always mean capitulation, it means coexistence, two truths sharing a room. Sometimes the fix is not a different conjunction but a period. Make two sentences. You did a great job. The strategy needs more depth. Two statements, both true, neither canceling the other. Or make time do the work. Praise today, debrief tomorrow. When praise and critique are fused into a single moment by the but, the nervous system grabs the threat and discards the gift. When they are separated, each can be heard in full. There is also the art of naming your intent before you speak. I want you to feel how impressed I am, and I also want to be precise about what's missing. Framing your motives does not weaken your point, it strengthens perception of fairness. People will tolerate hard truths when they can trust the ground they stand on. If you must use, but, use it like a scalpel, not a hammer. You're right about the timeline, but the budget constraint forces a different choice. Clear. Specific. Tethered to a constraint, not to a character judgment. Notice how, but, cascades into identity. You're talented, but you're unreliable, is not a note, it's a label. It erases the talent and brands the person. Shift to behavior. You delivered strong work, and 2 deadlines slipped. What support would keep that from happening again? Now the conversation stays in the realm of changeable action. The listener keeps their dignity, and with it, the energy to improve. Be alert to the sinister cousin of the but eraser, the prejudice preface. I'm not racist, but, I don't mean to be sexist, but, no offense, but. These are not shields, they are neon signs announcing that offense is coming, that bias is about to be voiced. The clause before the but is an attempt to erase moral responsibility. It does not work. The human ear hears the attempt as confirmation that the speaker knows better and is proceeding anyway. If you find one of those phrases forming, stop. Ask what truth you're trying to smuggle past your own conscience. If it can't pass without the preface, it shouldn't pass at all. There is a training you can practice in private. Write 10 sentences you say often that include, but. Rewrite each with, and, with a period, or with reordered clauses. Tape the better versions above your desk. Run your emails through the filter. Where does your, but, turn a bridge into a wall? In meetings, listen for how quickly a useful idea dies after someone says, yes, but. Try 3 rounds of yes, and, to build the idea before you interrogate it. You'll be shocked at how much more possibility survives long enough to be evaluated honestly. In the end, the but eraser is not a curse laid on language, it is a mirror held to our motives. We reach for, but, when we want to sound generous while being corrective, agreeable while disagreeing, kind while cutting. The word carries that double hunger perfectly. The question is whether we are brave enough to let our sentences carry single, clean intentions. I admire you. Full stop. I disagree. Full stop. I admire you, and I disagree. That is adult speech. That is how trust grows dense enough to hold real conflict. Listen to your next conversation as if it were music. The but is a sharp cymbal crash that wipes the measure clean and starts a different song. Crash often enough, and people leave the room. Use the instrument with intention, and your score can carry both light and shadow, praise and pressure, without erasing either. The work is not to ban a word, but to master it. Because under every but lives a choice, to negate or to integrate, to diminish or to dignify, to satisfy your need to be right or to strengthen the space where truth and care can coexist. Honestly, alarm. There's a moment in conversation when your ears tilt forward without your permission. It happens the instant someone says, honestly. Your spine straightens, your attention narrows, and a tiny alarm rings inside your head. Why? Because the promise of honesty implies a problem with everything that came before. If truth is the default in normal talk, then flagging honesty is like slapping a warning label on the next sentence, and, by contrast, quietly labeling the rest as less than true. That little word turns into an X-ray. It shows you where pressure lives in a relationship, where face is about to be lost, where a speaker thinks credibility needs to be purchased instead of earned. This alarm isn't superstition, it's a built-in inference engine. Conversation runs on expectations, cooperation, clarity, relevance, and truth. When a speaker prefaces a claim with honestly, to be honest, truth be told, or frankly, they step outside the normal contract to reassert a promise that should never have needed announcing. Your mind picks up the contradiction. If honesty must be declared, was it missing a second ago? And if it wasn't missing, then why declare it? The brain resolves that tension by elevating scrutiny. We lean forward, not because we're rude, but because language has just pulled a fire alarm. You've heard this in real life. A friend says, "Honestly, I'm fine," and the alarm rings because the tone is flat and the eyes slide away. A manager says, "Honestly, your work is great," but then pivots to a new deadline that triples your load, and you realize the compliment was a cushion for the blow, not a description of reality. A salesperson whispers, "Honestly, this is the last unit," while their pupils bounce to the shelf behind you. A politician leans into a podium and begins, "Frankly," and your mind silently reaches for receipts. The word doesn't prove deception, but it does mark a boundary where pressure and performance meet. Not all honestly moments are lies. Sometimes people use it like a turn signal, warning that an uncomfortable truth is coming. Sometimes it's a key to a hard door. To be honest, I'm scared. Honestly, I messed up. Frankly, I need help. In those cases, the preface functions as courage, a way to brace both speaker and listener for the heat of sincerity. But the signal still does its work. Your attention spikes, and you prepare to weigh not just the words, but the cost of saying them. Context is everything. Notice where honestly appears and how it is delivered. At the start of a confession with direct eye contact and specifics to follow, it often precedes truth. Stacked repeatedly, honestly, honestly. I'm being honest here. It begins to sound like a charm against suspicion, a verbal talisman waved to keep doubt away. Paired with vagueness, honestly, it just happened, or with blame shifting, honestly, if you hadn't, it drifts toward excuse-making. Dropped as a lifeboat after contradiction. I never said that. Honestly, you misunderstood. It feels like a patch over a leak. There's a reason this little word is so potent across cultures. Many languages carry a version of it that triggers the same intuition. We are social creatures balancing truth and harmony, and we instinctively know that promising honesty is often a prelude to either conflict or confession. That's why it bristles in apologies, negotiations, breakups, performance reviews, and viral influencer videos. The promise of honesty announces, "What I'm about to say might cost me something," or, less nobly, "What I'm about to say needs extra varnish to be believed." If you want to hear the truth beneath an honestly, don't pounce. Slow the moment down. Ask for the concrete. What makes you say that? Can you show me? When did that happen? People telling the truth tend to get more vivid under gentle questioning. They recall details, times, and consequences. People manufacturing a claim often drift to generalities, slogans, and moralizing. Watch how the story responds when you move from headline to footnote. Truth likes footnotes. Deception prefers banners. Also listen for what follows the promise. Good faith honestly is usually accompanied by ownership and cost. Honestly, I sent the file late and that delayed everyone. Performative honestly tends to outsource the pain. Honestly, the system is rigged. Honestly, everyone does this. Honestly, you're overreacting. One accepts responsibility and invites repair. The other recruits you into a narrative where responsibility evaporates. The difference is tempo as much as content. One shortens the distance to the fix, the other lengthens it with fog. If you're the one speaking, consider how the word shapes your credibility. When you say, honestly, you spend trust to buy attention. That can be wise if the next sentence delivers something testable, costly, and clear. But if you lean on it as a habit, you quietly teach your listeners that your default mode can't stand on its own. The cure is simple and difficult. Drop the pledge and do the work. Replace honestly with specifics. Replace frankly with evidence. Replace to be honest with a time, a place, a number, a name. Replace truth be told with I was wrong, and then repair the damage. Nothing sounds more honest than a sentence that carries its own proof. There are grace notes that help. Declare the limits of what you know. Here's what I saw. Here's what I don't know yet. Name your stake. I benefit if you choose this plan, and I still think it's best because, show your math. We promised 3 features, we delivered 2, here's why the third slipped, and here's when it lands. These moves do what honestly hopes to do without triggering the alarm. They treat the listener like a partner in reality, not a target for persuasion. Be wary, too, of the defensive cousin, I'm just being honest. That phrase is often a blunt instrument used to justify cruelty or laziness in thinking. Honesty isn't an excuse to abandon precision or empathy. If your statement can't survive a test of fairness and detail, it isn't honesty, it's a tantrum in a truth-colored coat. The goal isn't to say whatever you feel, the goal is to describe reality as clearly as you can, at a resolution that helps. In persuasion, the word can be a scalpel or a siren. Used once, before a hard fact, with receipts close behind, it can focus a room. Used repeatedly as a flourish, it becomes a red flag that the substance is thin and the style is doing the heavy lifting. Politicians know this. Influencers learn it the hard way. Partners hear it and take a breath before deciding whether to lean in or lean away. There's a final twist worth holding. Sometimes your inner voice says, honestly, before you speak aloud. That is your own alarm, telling you that you're about to cross from description to sales pitch, from clarity to convenience, from courage to camouflage. Listen to it. It's a compass. Ask yourself, what would this sound like without the pledge? What evidence would I have to bring if I couldn't buy belief with a word? If stripping the preface makes the sentence fall apart, you don't need honestly, you need a truer sentence. The honestly alarm isn't a lie detector. It's a signal to raise the resolution. It invites curiosity instead of cynicism, evidence instead of theater, and responsibility instead of performative sincerity. When you hear it from others, slow down and ask for the view behind the curtain. When you hear it inside yourself, let it pull you toward the hard, useful work of showing your work. In a world crowded with claims, the rarest sound is not honestly, but the quiet weight of reality, spoken plainly, demonstrated clearly, and followed by action that matches the words. That is what earns belief without ever having to beg for it. Should trap. Should. It sounds harmless, almost helpful, like a gentle nudge from a sensible friend. But listen closely and you'll hear the click of a trap. I should call them. I should be further along. I should go to the gym. The moment the word lands, the choice isn't a choice anymore. It becomes an obligation loaded with unspoken judgment, as if an invisible court has already passed sentence. The mind tightens. The body resists. And suddenly you're stuck, wanting the result, hating the demand, postponing the action, and then punishing yourself for the delay. That's the should trap, a single word that converts desire into duty, curiosity into compliance, and movement into paralysis. Think about how should works on your nervous system. It doesn't ask, it accuses. It implies that a better version of you exists somewhere else, and this current you is failing to meet the standard. Even when the task is good, exercise, rest, reaching out, the tone is moral, not motivational. The brain hears, you are wrong until you fix yourself. Shame is a poor fuel. It burns hot, sputters fast, and leaves a residue you carry into the next attempt. So you procrastinate, not because you're lazy, but because your autonomy is under threat. Reactance kicks in, the human impulse to resist control, even self-imposed control. The more you push with should, the more another part of you digs in its heels. Notice what should smuggles in. It borrows authority from somewhere vague, parents, culture, imaginary spectators, and hands it a megaphone in your head. Suddenly you're living for an audience that never claps, measuring yourself against rules no one signed. I should be married by now. I should feel grateful. I should never get angry. These aren't goals, they're invisible contracts drafted by voices you can't name. You do not owe your life to a ghost committee. There's also a sleight of hand. Should confuses values with verdicts. Values are chosen: health, love, mastery, integrity. Verdicts are imposed: guilty until proven perfect. When you say, I should write, you invoke a verdict. When you say, I want to write because my voice matters, you return to value. One opens a cage, the other unlocks it. Consider 3 everyday scenes. First, the gym. I should work out drags your energy into the past where you failed and the future where you'll be judged again. But I choose to move for 10 minutes because it clears my mind, pulls your attention into the present, and keeps the promise small enough to keep. Second, relationships. I should call my mother, compresses care into duty, resentment follows. I want to speak to my mother because I value connection, restores tenderness, and if you don't actually want to, that truth matters. Obligation without desire breeds performance, not love. Third, creative work. I should be consistent becomes a whip. I'm building a body of work. One imperfect page today becomes a bridge. Whips leave scars, bridges bear weight. The should trap multiplies because it operates at the identity level. Every time you fail to meet a should, you don't just miss a task, you become the kind of person who fails. That narrative tightens the next loop. The fix is not louder willpower, it's cleaner language and kinder contracts. Start with substitution. Swap should with one of 4 words: want, can, will, or won't. I should read becomes I want to read, which tests desire. I can read, which tests capacity. I will read, which commits, or I won't read, which is honest. Each version returns authorship to you. Even won't is freeing because it ends the civil war. You stop pretending, stop performing, and either renegotiate the plan or accept the cost. Then locate the hidden value. Ask, whose standard is this? What value of mine does it serve? What would happen if I didn't do it? If the answer is fear of judgment, you're serving the audience, not the value. If the answer is aligned, health, craft, loyalty, convert it into a willingness statement. Because I value X, I'm willing to do Y at cost Z. Willingness acknowledges friction, should denies it. Because I value strength, I'm willing to feel awkward for the first 10 minutes at the gym. That is a contract with reality, not fantasy. Shrink the promise until resistance is embarrassed to object. Tiny promises are not childish, they are engineering. 5 mindful breaths. 1 paragraph. A 2-minute walk. When you complete a small loop, you teach your nervous system. Action is safe, completion is possible. Momentum is not a mood, it's a consequence. Let the easy version be the doorway to the real thing. Create a language boundary around compulsion. Ban should, must, have to, and supposed to for 7 days. Replace them in speech and thought. Notice how often other people use them. Notice what happens to your posture when you hear them. You'll feel the tug of borrowed authority. You'll also feel the relief when you decline it. Not all obligations are imaginary. Some are ethical or structural, keeping your word, paying bills, caring for dependents. But even here, should weakens execution. I should pay rent invites avoidance. I will pay rent Friday at 10 a.m. schedules a behavior. Precision beats pressure. If a duty is real, put it on a calendar with a first step and a time box. Let the clock carry it. Don't let shame drag it. Beware the spiritualized should, the self-improvement loop that says, I should meditate, be grateful, forgive, optimize. Growth becomes another theater where you perform worthiness. Trade optimization for orientation. Ask, who am I becoming? And choose one habit that voices that identity today. Not a life overhaul. A single vote. Finally, practice the 3 C's, clarity, choice, and compassion. Clarity names reality without drama. I'm tired and scrolling. Choice restores agency. I will scroll 5 more minutes, then put the phone in the other room. Compassion guards the tone. Of course I'm tired, it's been a long day. 10 minutes of stretching is enough tonight. Harshness pretends to be strength. In truth, it breaks the instrument you're trying to play. You are not failing because you lack discipline. You're tangled in language that turns living into a trial. Every should makes a promise on your behalf to an audience that never shows up to help. Trade the trial for a treaty. Replace judgment with a clear plan tied to a true value. Make the plan smaller than your pride. Keep it anyway. Then let the completed loop speak louder than the old chorus. There will be days when the old scripts return, when should lands in your mouth before you can stop it. That's not proof you failed, it's proof you're human. Smile at the reflex, rename the sentence, and move the smallest piece you can move. The goal isn't to eliminate resistance, it's to stop negotiating your worth with it. Your life is not an invoice waiting to be paid by perfection. It is a series of choices made by the only person with the right to make them. You. In the end, freedom doesn't always feel like a drumbeat of motivation. Sometimes it's quiet. It sounds like this: because I value this, I choose this. Because I choose this, I will do this one small step now. Then you do it. No invisible court. No imaginary spectators. No borrowed authority. Just a decision, carried by your own consent, repeated often enough to become a life. Always, cage, imagine a word that turns a living person into a statue. Not stone, not ice. Just one small syllable that freezes motion and locks a story into place. That word is always. I always mess things up. You always forget. They always betray. It sounds like certainty, like truth carved in granite. But always is a cage. Once the door swings shut, behavior stops being an event and becomes an identity. Mistakes aren't moments anymore. They become names. And named things become destiny. Listen closely to the way always works. It edits time. Out of 1,000 attempts, it selects the failures and splices them into a highlight reel. Confirmation bias runs the projector. Your brain, trying to conserve energy, loves shortcuts. It builds a quick rule: I am this kind of person. Then the reticular activating system in your attention widens for evidence that fits and narrows for evidence that doesn't. You remember the 3 times you snapped and forget the 60 times you stayed calm. You remember the 2 rejections and forget the quiet yes that followed. Neurons that fire together wire together. Every repetition of the story strengthens its circuit. Soon the story is faster than the event. You don't fail and then think you're a failure. You think you're a failure and then fail in exactly the ways the story predicts. In relationships, always becomes a weapon. You always leave the dishes. You always interrupt. You always shut down. The moment we say it, we erase each other's complexity. The other person stops being a changing mind under stress and becomes a fixed trait under judgment. When people feel permanently defined, they stop experimenting, because experiments only make sense if outcomes can change. So they retreat to the safety of the label. The prophecy keeps fulfilling itself. In childhood, a single sentence can become a lifelong sentence. A teacher says, "You always daydream," and curiosity quietly shivers. A parent sighs, "You always overreact," and the child learns to distrust real signals from the body. Labels become the wallpaper of the mind. We stop noticing them, even as they color every decision. Years later, the room still looks the same, not because it cannot be repainted, but because the brain has forgotten paint exists. Watch how stress tightens the bars. Under threat, cortisol narrows perception to the immediate and the familiar. The default mode network rummages for identity statements. Who am I? What do I do in danger? If the stored answer is "I always quit when it's hard," quitting feels not only tempting but true. If the stored answer is "I always carry everyone else's burden," you'll lift until you break. This is how always masquerades as responsibility while quietly smuggling in exhaustion. Consider 3 lives. A runner hits a bad season and whispers, "I always fade at the end." In the final kilometer, that sentence is heavier than lactic acid. It changes stride choice by choice. A student freezes in math class and thinks, I always get numbers wrong. The amygdala lights, the prefrontal cortex dims, and what could be solved becomes impossible. Not because of ability, but because fear has rerouted blood flow. A partner argues, overhears themselves say, you always make me feel small, and both people collapse into roles. The accused defends, the accuser gathers proof, and no one notices the 1 hour last week when tenderness actually broke the pattern. Always also seduces groups. Companies brand themselves as we always move fast, and miss the moment when caution is wisdom. Communities say we always do it this way and build monuments to methods that no longer work. Algorithms learn your always and keep feeding it back to you, turning preference into prison. The cage scales from neuron to network. But a cage made of language can be unlocked by language. The first key is granularity. Replace always with timestamps and contexts. In high-pressure meetings, I tend to rush the final 2 minutes. Now you've named a pattern you can train. The second key is exception hunting. Ask your memory, when did the opposite happen, even a little? The brain hates being wrong. Show it evidence. That one meeting where you paused and asked a question. That Tuesday you went for the run anyway. That conversation where you said, I need 5 minutes, and came back softer. Each exception is a crack of daylight. Third, change tense. Add 2 words. Until now. I procrastinate becomes I procrastinated, until now. The brain expects congruence. If the self-concept tilts toward change, behavior strains to match. Fourth, build micro-proofs. Make the target so small it insults your resistance. 1 mindful breath before replying, 1 sentence of feedback written before you check your messages, 1 paragraph of the project before coffee. Small wins are not small. They are signals to the nervous system that the identity is updating. Fifth, separate trait from state. I am angry is glue. I am feeling anger is Velcro. Glue sticks. Velcro lets go. Emotions become weather, not climate. Sixth, make if-then plans that tie intention to precise cues. If my pulse spikes in a meeting, then I will write 1 word, pause, before I speak. If I hear myself say, always, then I will ask for 1 instance. This is not positive thinking. It is precise training. The brain learns fastest from clarity plus repetition. There's a deeper move, too. Practice identities that are verbs, not nouns. Instead of I am a calm person, try I practice calming skills under stress. Verbs invite action, nouns guard borders. When you fail, and you will, because you're alive, you haven't betrayed who you are. You've received information about which skill needs reps. Shame loses its favorite tool. Even the stories others told you can be revised without denying their impact. You don't have to pretend you weren't labeled. You can say, I was often called too sensitive, and sensitivity has become my instrument for noticing what others miss. Now the same trait wears different armor. The cage door is open. You still decide whether to step out. None of this erases responsibility. It sharpens it. When always dissolves, excuses dissolve with it. If you can change, then you are accountable for learning how. But accountability without possibility is a trap. Possibility without accountability is a wish. The escape is both, specific practice aimed at specific shifts, tracked and celebrated, repeated until the nervous system believes you. Stand in front of a mirror and listen for the word that locks you in. I always. Hear it as a hinge, not a verdict. Then start small, 1 exception on paper, 1 microproof in action, 1 if-then plan on a sticky note, 1 until now whispered before the hard thing. The brain rewires the way rivers carve canyons, slowly, then suddenly. Today a trickle around the rock, tomorrow a new channel. One day you will catch yourself doing something you always thought you couldn't, and the sound you hear won't be a dramatic epiphany. It will be a quiet click, the cage unlocking, the story revising, the future widening. Never curse. Listen closely to the word that ruins whole lives without ever raising its voice. Never. It sounds absolute, clean, decisive, like a slammed door. But inside the mind, never is a curse. It erases exceptions, edits out evidence, and magnifies mistakes until they look larger than reality. Say it once, I never get it right, they never listen, good things never last, and you can feel the world shrink. Possibility drains away. Your past becomes a pattern, your future a sentence. The curse doesn't need thunder, it needs repetition. Each time you say it, you tighten the knot. We don't begin life speaking in absolutes. We learn them. A forgotten birthday becomes, they never care. A single rejection becomes, I'll never be enough. One argument becomes, this will never work. The brain is an efficient storyteller, and never is its favorite shortcut, compressing time into a single verdict, blending good, bad, and ordinary moments into one heavy word. It's faster than memory, more persuasive than facts, and once spoken, it recruits every perception to prove itself right. Psychology names the pattern: overgeneralization, all-or-nothing thinking, confirmation bias, negativity bias, but labels don't capture the lived weight of it. Never acts like a lens that darkens everything behind it. You check your phone and miss the kind message because your eye locks on the curt reply. You recall 10 projects and remember the single failure with cinematic clarity. Never is a ruthless curator, arranging your museum of memory so every corridor leads to the same bleak exhibit. You don't, they won't, it can't. Consider a simple day. You send an application and hear nothing by evening. The curse whispers, they're ignoring you. They always do. You forget the times responses arrived days later, the invisible calendars on other desks. Your partner misses a detail. You never listen. You dismiss the countless quiet attentions, the coffee set just the way you like, the appointment remembered without reminder, the door locked carefully each night. Driving home, you hit one red light and declare, I never catch a break, as though the entire city had conspired with the sky against you. A day becomes a case file against your life. In groups, the curse becomes contagious. One missed deadline metastasizes into, we never deliver. One tense meeting becomes, they never support us. Companies carve the word into policy, preparing endlessly for phantom catastrophes while neglecting their real strengths. Families do the same, we never talk, he never tries, she never apologizes. Roles harden. People become prisoners inside old versions of themselves, even when change is real. Once roles calcify, forgiveness and growth find no door to enter. Memory is not a recording, it is a reconstruction. Each recall is a rebuild, tinted by the mood of the moment. The curse exploits this fragility. It edits the highlight reel, lowering the brightness on victories, amplifying the hiss on losses. Soon, the story you tell about yourself shrinks. You plan for a world that doesn't exist, the world where you are forever the person who failed once, never the one who kept trying. Never also distorts time. It stretches one bad hour into a lifetime, and it compresses years of growth into silence. You were shy once, so you'll never be persuasive. You lost once, so you'll never be lucky. You hurt someone then, so you'll never be safe now. It denies the mathematics of learning, the slow build of skill, the invisible increments of practice. The curse hates patience, because patience breaks spells. It makes another cruel promise. That prediction equals protection. If you declare never, you will not be blindsided. But armor becomes a cage. You stop risking love because it will never last. You stop shipping work because success will never come. You stop apologizing because trust will never return. The curse promises safety from surprise, then taxes every joy to pay for it. And it hunts for proof. Say, no one ever helps, and you don't ask clearly. People assume you're fine. Say, opportunities never come, and you stop scanning, stop preparing. When a door does open, you miss it. The curse is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Belief shapes behavior, behavior shapes outcome, outcome feeds belief. A closed loop, endlessly recycling despair. How do you fracture it? With specifics. Replace never with numbers. Not, I never hear back. But 3 of the last 12 replied. Replace absolutes with timestamps, so far this month. Replace verdicts with variables, under these conditions. When the mind is forced to track reality, exceptions emerge. The friend who did show up, the day your courage did carry you, the time your work did land. Keep an exception log. Small, unglamorous entries. Today someone listened, this week I was consistent, this morning I felt clear. Tiny notes dismantle grand illusions. The curse feeds on drama. Boring truth starves it. Reframe language in real time. Swap never for rarely, not yet, today it didn't, until now. These are not euphemisms. They are precise. Never collapses probability to zero. Precision restores probability to life. Add conditions. When I'm tired, I miss details. That is not a prison sentence. It's a map. And maps can be updated. Test reality with experiments. If you believe, I'll never speak up, try one sentence in one meeting. If, they'll never forgive me, offer one apology that names what, why, and how you'll repair. If, we'll never finish, time box 90 minutes and tackle one obstacle. The point is not to overturn the curse in a day, but to splinter its hold with fresh data. Guard your environment. Absolutes are contagious. Leaders who repeat, never, drain initiative from teams. Parents who say, you never, pass children a costume too small to grow in. Challenge absolutes gently. What would you need to see to change your mind? If the answer is, nothing, you found a curse, not a truth. And remember, never is sticky because it hides grief. I'll never trust again, can mean, I was hurt beyond language. I'll never forgive, can mean, the cost was greater than I can carry. In these places, contradiction is cruel. Offer rituals instead, letters never sent, boundaries that hold, distance that heals. The goal is not to force reconciliation, but to prevent wounds from becoming permanent physics. If you must choose a strong word, use until. Until leaves the door ajar. Until I learn the skill. Until we change the process. Until the season turns. Even a mind allergic to hope can tolerate, until. It honors pain without embalming it. Now imagine your life as a courtroom. Never is the prosecutor, presenting only the ugliest exhibits. Appoint a defense, the calendar where you showed up, the note where someone thanked you, the quiet morning you did not quit. Place the whole case on the table. Let the verdict be revised by facts, not fear. You will not silence the curse forever. But you can lower its volume. You can catch it early, before it freezes your story. You can collect exceptions until it has nothing left to cling to. And when you forget, because you will, remember this. The sentence, I always say never, contradicts itself. Inside that contradiction lies your escape. The truth of a life is not absolute. It is a moving average, shaped by what you measure, pulled upward by every exception you choose to count. When you measure wisely, the horizon shifts. The curse weakens. And possibility, once banished, begins to return. First as a whisper, then as thunder, widening the room you thought would stay small forever. Fine, facade, picture the moment. Someone asks, how are you? And without hesitation, the reply comes, I'm fine. The syllable is short, sharp, and practiced, a shield polished by repetition. On the surface, it signals normalcy, stability, nothing to worry about. Yet often, beneath that word lies a world of unsaid truths, stress, sadness, anger, exhaustion, that never make it past the lips. This is the fine facade, one of the most common and most deceptive masks humans wear. The word fine works because it is safe. It closes doors instead of opening them. When you say, fine, you aren't inviting further questions, you are telling the other person that the subject is finished. It is a socially acceptable end to an exchange, a full stop disguised as an answer. Unlike good or great, which can spark curiosity, fine flattens the moment. It gives the impression of contentment while concealing turbulence, protecting the speaker from vulnerability and the listener from discomfort. It is the verbal equivalent of a locked smile. But here's the paradox. The more often fine is used, the less fine life usually is. People rarely use the word when they are truly thriving. Instead, it emerges at points of tension, when a relationship is fraying, when work is overwhelming, when emotions are raw but unsafe to share. In arguments, "I'm fine" means the opposite. It means the conversation is over, that the real wound is being pushed underground. In personal struggle, it becomes camouflage, a way to avoid explaining pain that feels too heavy, too shameful, or too complex. Think of how often this word shapes relationships. A partner asks what's wrong, and the response is, "Nothing, I'm fine." The partner knows it isn't true, the tone betrays it, the eyes betray it, but the facade holds. Friends ask about stress, and instead of confession, there's dismissal. In families, fine keeps generations at arm's length, children from parents, siblings from siblings, all pretending equilibrium while silence breeds distance. In workplaces, it is the professional mask, when overwork, burnout, or resentment simmer, but the culture doesn't allow honesty. "I'm fine" becomes code for, "I don't feel safe telling you the truth." Psychologically, this habit comes from fear and self-protection. To admit not being fine is to risk judgment, pity, or rejection. In societies where productivity is valued above well-being, saying, "fine," keeps you from appearing weak. In cultures where emotions are policed, where men must be stoic, women must be agreeable, workers must be resilient, the facade is rewarded. People learn early that truth invites discomfort, but "fine" allows life to glide smoothly without confrontation. It is the ultimate lubricant for social machinery. Yet the cost is enormous. "Fine" blocks intimacy. It erases opportunities for support. It leaves the speaker isolated, bottling emotions that need release. Over time, this facade hardens into habit, and even when someone longs to say, "I'm scared," "I'm angry," or "I need help," the reflex of "fine" silences them. The result is disconnection. Conversations stay shallow, relationships weaken, and individuals carry pain alone. In this way, the word doesn't just mask discomfort, it sustains it. There are also layers of irony in "fine." In conflict, it often means the opposite. When someone says, "I'm fine" in a clipped voice, what they mean is, "I'm furious, but I won't say it." Tone turns the word into a weapon, a passive-aggressive closure that punishes the listener for not already knowing the truth. Thus, "fine" can be both shield and dagger, hiding vulnerability while stabbing at the other with silence. Breaking the facade is not easy, because it requires both courage and safety. To replace "fine" with honesty, the environment must feel capable of holding that honesty. If someone asks, "How are you?" and you reply, "Actually, I'm struggling," will they listen? Will they judge? Will they brush it aside? If the answer feels unsafe, the facade remains. That is why the responsibility is shared. We need individuals willing to risk honesty, but also communities willing to receive it. Imagine instead what would happen if "fine" disappeared from your vocabulary. If instead of the facade, you chose specifics. "I'm tired. I'm worried. I'm excited but nervous." Each one is short, but unlike "fine," they open doors instead of closing them. They invite connection, empathy, and dialogue. They transform routine exchanges into moments of truth. Even in workplaces, such honesty can humanize relationships that otherwise remain transactional. The "fine" facade is more than just a word, it is a symptom of how much we fear truth in daily life. We fear burdening others, we fear judgment, we fear the vulnerability of exposure. Yet the paradox is that the honesty we fear is often the very thing that strengthens relationships, deepens trust, and eases loneliness. "I'm fine" keeps us safe in the moment, but it robs us of the safety that comes from being truly seen. So next time you feel the word forming on your lips, pause. Ask yourself, am I really fine, or am I hiding? What would happen if I named the real feeling, even in a small way? It doesn't have to be a confession of everything. It can be a breadcrumb of truth, enough to break the mask. Because sometimes, the most powerful sentence isn't, "I'm fine." It's, actually, "Can I tell you what's really going on?" And that, unlike "fine," is where connection begins. Fair illusion. Imagine a word so simple, so ordinary, that it slips into conversation without resistance, yet carries enough hidden force to bend decisions. That word is fair. At first glance, it feels innocent. Who doesn't want to be fair? Fairness is justice distilled into a single syllable. It promises balance, reason, morality. But beneath its surface, fair often works less like truth and more like leverage. It can be an illusion, a shortcut around logic that pressures people into agreement, not because the argument is strong, but because no one wants to be accused of being unfair. Think about how often you've heard it. That's only fair. To be fair. Isn't it fair if? The word arrives as if it were the conclusion of an argument, but in reality, it's a substitute for one. When someone says, "It's only fair you take your turn," they are not proving why. It's already been framed as morally necessary. Refusal is not disagreement, it's a violation of virtue. The listener is pinned not by evidence, but by implication. If you object, you are unjust, selfish, less human. That is the power of the fairness illusion. In negotiations, fair becomes a weapon disguised as reason. A company might say, "It's only fair that workers accept these cuts, we're all tightening our belts." The word cloaks imbalance with moral inevitability, hiding the fact that the burden is not equally distributed. In personal life, a partner might say, "It's only fair you forgive me," skipping over responsibility, apology, or repair. The word leaps over logic like a stone skipping water, racing straight to the pressure point. No one wants to stand on the side of unfairness. The danger is subtle. Fairness is real and valuable, but when the word is invoked instead of demonstrated, it creates a mirage. You feel the weight of morality, but when you reach for substance, your hand closes on air. Like an optical illusion, it convinces the eye without convincing the mind. And because fairness is tied to identity, our sense of being good, decent people, the illusion works quickly, bypassing reason. There are ways to test it. When someone calls something fair, pause and ask, fair by what measure? Fair in comparison to what? Fairness has metrics, equal pay for equal work, equal chances, shared burdens. If those measures can be shown, the fairness is real. If not, then the word is acting as a spell. The illusion fades when you demand details. Fair without evidence is persuasion by guilt, not by logic. History is filled with examples of fairness illusions. Rulers declared new taxes as only fair, though they fell hardest on the poor. Companies called child labor fair exchange for food and shelter. Even in personal arguments, families have used fair to enforce silence. It's only fair you don't complain after all we've done for you. The word, in these cases, masked exploitation with a moral gloss. But fairness, when true, is powerful. It stabilizes communities, makes peace possible, and protects against domination. That's why the illusion is so dangerous. It mimics justice while smuggling in coercion. It convinces you to lower your guard, to surrender logic in the name of virtue. The lesson is not to distrust fairness, but to sharpen your eye when you hear it. If someone calls a demand fair, ask for the ledger. What costs are being shared? What benefits balance the scales? If they can show you, then fairness is real, and the word is the shorthand of justice. If they cannot, then you've uncovered the illusion. Fair is a mirror held up to your conscience. It makes you flinch at the idea of being unfair, even before you've had time to judge. But conscience deserves clarity, not tricks. The next time the word is deployed, let the alarm ring. Ask the missing questions. Pull apart the illusion. Because true fairness does not need pressure, it stands on its own, visible, measurable, undeniable. Maybe stall. Maybe. A tiny word, soft on the surface, heavy underneath. It sounds harmless, even wise, an open door, a pause for reflection. But left unchecked, maybe becomes a trap. It keeps decisions hovering in suspension, neither chosen nor rejected, draining energy every second it lingers. A yes commits. A no releases. But maybe keeps you captive in the middle, creating tension without resolution, a low hum of unease that follows you everywhere. Think about the way it works. You tell yourself, maybe I'll start the project tomorrow. Maybe I'll reach out to them later. Maybe I'll make a change when things feel right. On the surface, it feels flexible. You haven't locked yourself in, and you haven't shut the door. But underneath, your mind is burning energy, carrying the weight of a choice never made. Every glance at the unfinished task, every reminder of the waiting message, reignites the loop. Not done, not closed, not free. Maybe pretends to protect you from the discomfort of decision, but in truth, it only prolongs it. This is why maybe often feels worse than failure. A yes can stretch you, a no can free you, but maybe bleeds you slowly. It is an open tab in your mental browser, a background process consuming memory, a conversation replaying endlessly with no conclusion. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance, the strain of holding contradictory states at once. You want the thing, but you don't. You fear regret, but you fear action too. And so, maybe, keeps you in purgatory, unable to rest, unable to move. Consider relationships. Maybe I'll call them back. Maybe I'll commit. Maybe I'll leave. Each maybe becomes a chain of silent promises, straining both sides with uncertainty. Or work, maybe I'll change careers. Maybe I'll start the business. Years pass, the decision never made, tension baked into every day. Even small things, maybe I'll clean the kitchen after the show, turn your space into a mirror of indecision. The clutter builds outside, but the real clutter builds inside. Why do we cling to maybe? Because choice is loss. Every yes kills 1,000 other yes. Every no slams a door that will not open again. We fear regret more than we fear stagnation. So we float in maybe, convincing ourselves we're keeping options alive, when in truth we're sacrificing the present to protect an imagined future that never arrives. But the paradox is clear. Indecision is a decision. Every day spent in maybe is a silent no to progress, to clarity, to peace. Time doesn't pause for you to think. It flows, carrying your stalled choices into lost opportunities. The longer you hover, the heavier the weight becomes. Breaking the maybe stall doesn't always mean saying yes. Often, the real freedom comes from saying no, cleanly, clearly, without apology. Every no sharpens your life, clears space, restores energy. And every yes, once chosen, frees you to move with both feet. The trick is to stop treating decisions as life sentences. They are moves, experiments, votes. You can re-choose tomorrow, but you cannot reclaim today spent in limbo. Try this. When faced with a maybe, ask yourself, if I had to decide right now, what would I choose? Your gut will answer faster than your brain. Or shrink the choice into a trial. Commit for a week, a day, an hour. Decision becomes lighter when you frame it as practice, not permanence. Above all, notice the toll maybe takes. It promises safety, but it only multiplies tension. The mind craves closure. A yes creates motion, a no creates peace. Only maybe creates torment. Life is too short to hover between. Say yes and step forward, or say no and step free. Either way, the air clears, the tension lifts, and your energy returns to the present. The word maybe was never protection, it was a stall. And once you see it, you no longer have to wait. You choose, and in choosing, you breathe again. Interesting, buffer. There is a word we use so casually, so lightly, that it slips past notice. But hidden inside it is a mask, a pause, a signal of judgment withheld. That word is interesting. On the surface, it seems harmless, even polite. Someone presents an idea, and instead of saying what you truly think, you murmur, interesting. It buys you time. It cloaks hesitation. It spares you from confrontation. Yet in its silence lies meaning, and more often than not, that meaning is disapproval. Interesting is not curiosity. It is a buffer, a word used when we don't want to commit to truth. The power of this word lies in its ambiguity. Language normally carries intention with clarity, yes or no, approval or rejection. But interesting avoids the line. It suggests thoughtfulness, but delivers distance. It seems to promise engagement, but conceals resistance. When someone shares a bold plan, an unusual perspective, or a vulnerable piece of themselves, hearing "that's interesting" often feels like stepping into fog. What exactly does it mean? Do they approve? Do they disapprove? Or worse, do they not care at all? The very vagueness of the word makes it unsettling. Psychologists studying communication call this buffering, using vague or ambiguous responses to soften what we truly feel. In diplomacy, in business, even in intimate relationships, buffers become shields. Interesting is one of the most common. It appears to protect politeness, but it actually erodes trust, because people intuit the hidden message. Most of us can feel when interesting means, "I don't like this, but I won't say it out loud." The brain is a master of subtext. Tone, timing, and body language reveal what the word conceals. Imagine a conversation at work. A colleague presents a new strategy, one that challenges the way things have always been done. Around the table, silence. Then someone says, interesting. The air shifts. Everyone knows it does not mean enthusiasm. It means hesitation, doubt, or quiet rejection. But because the word is non-committal, no one confronts it directly. The strategy dies in ambiguity, smothered not by argument but by buffers. Or consider relationships. A partner shares a dream, starting a business, writing a book, moving to a new city. The reply, interesting. Not, I love this. Not, I'm worried. Not even, let's discuss. Just a placeholder that hides true emotion. Over time, a pattern of buffers builds walls. Instead of open honesty, conversations fill with half signals, each side decoding what is not said rather than trusting what is. The word becomes a symbol not of curiosity, but of withheld judgment. This dynamic reveals something deeper about human behavior. Our fear of disapproval collides with our fear of conflict. We do not want to crush ideas, but we do not want to endorse them either. So we hover. We use interesting as a pause button, a way of keeping the conversation alive while our inner verdict stays locked away. But the cost is clarity. Without clarity, trust decays. Without trust, communication falters. What began as a polite word becomes a toxin. The interesting buffer also highlights a paradox in perception. When we say it, we imagine we are being neutral, even kind. But to the listener, neutrality often sounds negative. Studies in workplace communication show that ambiguous responses are interpreted more harshly than direct ones. A blunt, "I disagree," may sting, but it is clear. A vague, "interesting," leaves the mind to fill in the blanks, and the brain, wired for survival, often fills them with threat. Uncertainty is experienced as danger. That single word can create more anxiety than outright rejection. And yet, buffers are not always lies. Sometimes interesting truly does mean fascination. Sometimes it is genuine curiosity. But the problem is that the word has been used so often as a veil that its credibility erodes. We no longer trust it. Tone of voice becomes the deciding factor. Interesting, with bright enthusiasm, signals wonder. Interesting, with a pause and lowered tone, signals skepticism. The same syllables, the same letters, carry opposite meanings depending on context. It is language stripped of stability, a mask that changes with the actor's face. If we want to escape the trap of buffers, we must move toward precision. Instead of saying interesting to mask disapproval, name the truth. I'm not convinced. I'd like to know more. I have concerns. These are harder words, sharper words, but they are alive with clarity. In contrast, when interesting truly means fascination, let it show in action. Ask a question, lean in, build on the idea. Genuine curiosity is not a buffer, it is a bridge. The deeper danger of the interesting buffer is that it trains both sides into dishonesty. The speaker learns to hide judgment. The listener learns to decode silence instead of trusting words. Over time, people stop believing what is said and instead watch for what is avoided. This is how communication collapses into subtext, suspicion, and guessing games. And it begins with something as simple as a single word that says less than it means. Think about the last time you used it. Did you mean wonder, or did you mean disapproval? Did you protect the other person's feelings, or did you avoid responsibility for your own truth? Language is not just about information. It is about courage. Every buffer, every vague, interesting, is a small retreat from that courage. So the next time the word hovers on your lips, pause. Ask yourself, am I hiding, or am I curious? If you are hiding, choose clarity instead. If you are curious, show it with questions. Either way, step out of the buffer. Because words are not just tools, they are maps. And every time we say interesting as a shield, we lead others into fog. But every time we choose precision, we lead them into trust. The interesting buffer seems harmless, but it reveals one of the deepest truths of communication, that silence disguised as language is not neutral, it is corrosive. It buys peace in the moment, but it sells out connection in the long run. And in that quiet transaction, the price we pay is authenticity itself. Whatever wall, there is a word that ends more than arguments. It ends bridges, it ends connection, it ends the chance to be understood. That word is whatever. At first, it sounds harmless, casual, even dismissive in a playful way. But when spoken in the heat of conflict, or in the hollow silence of avoidance, it becomes a wall, one of the most effective walls language can build. The whatever wall doesn't just cut off conversation, it severs emotional connection, leaving both sides stranded on opposite shores. Think of how it lands. One person reaches out with frustration, with a need to be heard. The other, instead of answering, instead of leaning in, drops the word, whatever. It signals not just disagreement, but refusal. Refusal to engage, to feel, to risk vulnerability. It's a word that says, this conversation is over on my terms. It's a word that freezes the other person in place, leaving them unheard, dismissed, invalidated. And because it feels so final, it builds resentment on one side, and emotional distance on the other. Psychologists call this stonewalling, and it's one of the most destructive patterns in relationships. Where criticism and defensiveness escalate fights, stonewalling ends them with cold silence. And whatever is its weapon. It's the verbal equivalent of turning your back, the single syllable that shuts down repair before it can begin. Research shows that couples who fall into the cycle often grow more alienated over time, because every whatever writes another brick into the wall between them. But the whatever wall isn't confined to intimate relationships. In workplaces, it poisons collaboration. One person raises a concern, another answers, whatever, do what you want. The discussion ends, not with resolution, but with dismissal. Over time, teammates stop raising concerns, stop offering ideas, stop trusting that their voice matters. The wall grows higher, until silence replaces creativity. In families, too, the word becomes a wedge. A parent says, whatever to a child's protest, and the child learns that emotion is unwelcome. A teenager mutters it to a parent, and the bond frays further. The word teaches withdrawal, not repair. What makes whatever so dangerous is that it carries the illusion of control. The speaker feels safe, because they have stepped out of vulnerability. No need to argue, no need to risk saying something wrong, no need to be hurt. But the safety is hollow. Control comes at the cost of connection. In the long run, it isn't protection, it's isolation. And yet, the temptation is strong. To say whatever is to avoid the discomfort of conflict. It is to choose numbness over engagement, detachment over exposure. But conflict, when faced honestly, is a chance to deepen understanding. When it is avoided, connection decays. That is why every whatever buys short-term relief at the price of long-term distance. How do you dismantle the wall? First, by noticing its presence. By catching the moment you are tempted to say it, and asking instead, what am I protecting myself from? Am I too tired to talk, too overwhelmed to listen, too afraid to feel exposed? Then say that instead. Replace whatever with I need a pause, or this is hard for me to hear, or even I don't know how to respond right now. These words may feel more vulnerable, but they leave the door open. They say, I am still here, even if I cannot go further in this moment. For those on the receiving end, the whatever wall is equally painful. But the answer is not to hammer harder against it. That only strengthens resistance. Instead, it is to call it what it is. To say, when you say whatever, I feel shut out. I want to understand, but I can't if you won't let me in. This reframes the wall not as power, but as loss of connection, loss of the very relationship both parties depend upon. Because beneath the wall, there is always something unsaid. Whatever is rarely indifference, it is often fear, hurt, or anger in disguise. To name the feeling is to soften the wall. To stay curious, even when dismissed, is to create cracks where honesty can seep through. Over time, those cracks can widen, and the wall can fall. In the end, the whatever wall is a monument to avoidance. It stands tall in silence, but it offers no shelter. If left untouched, it will separate people until the relationship itself crumbles. But if faced with courage, if one person dares to name the wall and the other dares to step around it, then what seemed like the end of connection can become the beginning of a deeper one. So the next time the word rises to your lips, pause. The relief of saying whatever lasts a moment. The distance it creates can last a lifetime. Choose a harder word, a truer word, a word that keeps the conversation alive. For relationships are not destroyed by conflict. They are destroyed by walls. And no wall is built faster, or broken more easily, than the one made of a single, careless whatever. Normal chain. Think about the word normal. On its surface, it feels harmless, even comforting. Normal is the steady heartbeat of society, the baseline we compare ourselves to, the invisible chain linking people together. But hidden in its simplicity is something more suffocating. The normal chain is the quiet demand that everyone align with an agreed standard, that we walk in step with a group, that difference be trimmed away until only conformity remains. It looks like safety, but it often functions as a cage, erasing the very individuality that makes us human. The power of the normal chain is subtle. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It appears in a classroom where a child who thinks differently is told to just pay attention like everyone else. It emerges in workplaces where employees are urged to fit the culture rather than challenge it. It dominates in families where generational expectations are enforced with phrases like, "This is how we do things," or "That's not normal." The chain is forged link by link, not by laws or punishments, but by 1,000 everyday nudges that signal, belong, or be marked as strange. Psychologically, humans crave belonging. To our ancient ancestors, deviation meant danger. Being cast out of the tribe could mean death. That fear lingers in our wiring. We internalize the idea that survival equals conformity. The normal chain takes advantage of this instinct, training us to self-police. We trim our thoughts, we edit our speech, we disguise our desires, until one day, we confuse survival with silence. We call it maturity, professionalism, or respectability, when in truth it is often just the cost of suppressing difference. The word normal itself carries poison disguised as medicine. When someone says, "That's not normal," they don't simply describe frequency, they declare judgment. It is the velvet glove of rejection, implying that anything outside the invisible curve of majority behavior is defective. People who are neurodivergent, queer, artistic, spiritual in non-traditional ways, or simply unconventional feel this most sharply. The normal chain presses them down, teaching them to apologize for existing outside the average. And yet, history's breakthroughs, scientific, artistic, cultural, have almost always come from those willing to live outside normal. Examples are everywhere. When Galileo argued that Earth orbits the Sun, he was punished for violating the normal belief. When early jazz musicians bent notes and defied classical structures, critics sneered that it wasn't normal music. When women demanded the right to vote, they were branded as hysterical, unnatural, abnormal. The normal chain binds the present by sanctifying the past, insisting that what is common must also be correct. Yet the very progress we cherish came from breaking the links. And still, the chain persists in subtle modern ways. Social media curates images of normal life, the perfect family, the proper body, the acceptable career path. Algorithms reinforce what is average, starving us of the diversity that reminds us life can be lived in infinite forms. At school, children who don't learn at the same pace are labeled as slow or deficient instead of recognized as uniquely wired. In communities, those who grieve differently, worship differently, or love differently are treated as suspect. Normal becomes a weapon of exclusion, an excuse for cruelty disguised as tradition. The deepest danger of the normal chain is internalization. People learn to wear masks so well that they forget they are masks. They stop pursuing the odd passions that make their heart race, stop asking the questions that unsettle others, stop dressing, speaking, or thinking in ways that highlight their uniqueness. They live a life not of authenticity but of performance. The world gains another person who is well-adjusted, and loses another person who might have illuminated a new path. The chain doesn't just shackle, it erases. But the truth is this: normal is not real. It is a statistical abstraction, a mathematical average pulled from a messy, chaotic, brilliant spectrum of human existence. The curve is invented, the individual is real. To break the normal chain is not to rebel for rebellion's sake, but to recognize that what is common is not always what is right, and what is rare is not always what is wrong. True freedom begins when we stop asking, "Is this normal?" and start asking, "Is this true to me?" Imagine a world where individuality is not just tolerated but celebrated. Where being different is not framed as eccentricity but as contribution. Where children are raised not to mimic a standard but to unfold their own design. Breaking the normal chain does not mean chaos. It means variety, richness, the kind of diversity that strengthens communities and cultures instead of weakening them. So the next time you hear someone say, "That's not normal," pause. Ask, who's normal? Who decided the measure? Who benefits from keeping it? Behind every demand for normalcy lies a fear of difference, and behind every act of difference lies the possibility of transformation. The chain may bind quietly, but it can be broken loudly, one person at a time choosing to live unmasked. Because in the end, progress has never come from the normal. It has always come from those who dared to be themselves, even when the world told them not to. Calm down, spark. There are phrases in language that act like sparks thrown into dry grass. They are meant to soothe, to quiet, to de-escalate, but instead they ignite the very fire they claim to extinguish. Chief among them is the command, "Calm down." On the surface, it is a plea for peace, an invitation to step back from anger or panic. But in practice, it almost always produces the opposite effect. Rather than cooling the moment, it accelerates it, turning tension into combustion. Why does this happen? Because calm down is less about the other person's feelings and more about our own discomfort with them. To hear it is to be told, your emotions are inconvenient, excessive, out of bounds. It doesn't validate, it dismisses. It doesn't recognize, it denies. And human beings, wired for dignity and recognition, flare when they are minimized. What was once frustration becomes fury, what was once anxiety becomes panic, because now the struggle is not only with the original problem but with the erasure of one's own experience. Think of a time you were in distress. Maybe your hands shook with fear, maybe your voice broke with anger. If someone met you with patience, listened, acknowledged, mirrored your concern, you felt the edge soften. But if they cut across your storm with, "Calm down," it landed like a slap. It told you that not only were you upset, but you were wrong to be upset. The command isolates instead of connects, and the heart responds with resistance. You don't understand. You don't see me. Now I must prove it louder. This paradox has been measured. Studies in psychology show that when people feel their emotions invalidated, their stress hormones spike higher. Heart rates climb, skin conductance rises, anger intensifies. The very physiology of the body rejects dismissal. The phrase that was meant to be medicine becomes poison, because it tries to control emotion instead of accompanying it. The effect is not confined to personal arguments. Leaders who tell crowds to calm down often inflame unrest. Parents who order children to calm down often watch tantrums escalate. Even in negotiations, a well-timed calm down can turn dialogue into deadlock. It is a trigger phrase, one that shortcuts to defiance. The spark lies in its irony. It demands a state of calm while modeling none. Commanding calm is itself an act of agitation. There are alternatives, and they reveal the anatomy of what calm down fails to do. Replace dismissal with recognition. I see this is upsetting you. Replace control with collaboration. Let's take a breath together. Replace command with curiosity. What's weighing on you most right now? Each of these validates emotion, honors the storm, and in doing so, begins to settle it. Calm is not ordered into being. It is grown through recognition and safety. Yet the persistence of calm down shows how language can betray our instincts. In moments of tension, we crave quick fixes. We want to throw a blanket over the fire instead of building trust to let it burn out. But human beings are not switches to be flipped. They are fields of dry grass. The wrong spark can set them ablaze. The calm down spark is a reminder that words are not neutral. They carry chemistry. They can raise pulse rates or lower them, fracture trust or bind it. When you feel the urge to use that phrase, pause. Ask yourself, is this about helping the other person find peace, or about silencing them so I can have mine? That question alone can redirect the spark into something safer. In the end, calm is never imposed. It is invited. It grows when emotions are heard, when voices are allowed to run their course, when dignity is left intact. To say, calm down, is to strike flint in a drought. To listen, to mirror, to breathe, that is how you bring rain to the fire. Obviously, dagger. Obviously. A word meant to clarify, but often used as a dagger. It slips into sentences coated with certainty, but its true edge is sharper. It shames the listener for not already knowing. When someone says, well, obviously this is how it works, the content isn't the wound, the tone is. It suggests you should have known, should have seen, should have understood without help. What could have been an invitation to learn becomes a quiet humiliation, leaving the listener smaller, hesitant, and wary of asking again. The power of obviously lies in its double message. On the surface, it points out something self-evident. But hidden underneath, it carries judgment. If you didn't see this, you're behind. It draws a line between those in the know and those left outside. And once that line is drawn, curiosity suffers. Questions shrink. Dialogue freezes. Nobody wants to be shamed for ignorance, so the safest move is silence. Yet silence is how learning dies. Think of classrooms, workplaces, friendships. A student asks a question, and the teacher answers with, well, obviously the answer is X. The child hears not just the solution, but the sting. I should have known that already. The next time, the question stays unasked. Or in a meeting, someone timidly proposes an idea. A colleague replies, obviously that wouldn't work. What's heard isn't reasoning, but dismissal. The idea might crumble, but so does the trust to speak again. Even in relationships, obviously, can poison closeness. Obviously, I care about you. If it was obvious, why did it need to be said in a way that belittled doubt? At its root, obviously, reveals more about the speaker than the listener. It's often a defense mechanism, a way to assert authority, hide insecurity, or shortcut vulnerability. Declaring something obvious elevates the speaker into the role of the enlightened, at the expense of whoever is still catching up. It is a mask of superiority, even when unintentional. And yet, what is obvious? To a mathematician, a proof step is obvious. To a child, it is incomprehensible. To a programmer, code logic is obvious. To a beginner, it is a labyrinth. Knowledge is relative, context-bound. What feels like plain daylight to one person can be midnight shadow to another. The word obvious erases that relativity. It pretends the mountain was a flat plain, ignoring the climb it took to see the view. There is a quieter tragedy in the dagger. By shaming the question, obviously, closes the door on connection. Every time someone is made to feel small for not knowing, an opportunity for teaching, trust, and shared discovery is lost. And if repeated, it plants seeds of self-doubt. People stop trusting their curiosity, stop believing their perspective matters. They learn to nod along, while inside they are shrinking. The antidote is humility. Replace obviously with recognition. Say, here's something that helped me understand. Or, at first this confused me, until I saw it this way. These statements teach without belittling, invite without dividing. They honor the path of learning, instead of punishing someone for not being further along it. And for the listener, it helps to remember, what's framed as obvious was once hidden to everyone, even the expert. Every truth had a moment of discovery. Every insight had a first learner. You're not late, you're on the path. The word obviously tries to turn knowledge into hierarchy, but knowledge is not a ladder. It is a landscape, wide enough for everyone to enter at different gates. So beware the dagger hidden in plain speech. Obviously is rarely obvious at all. It is a weapon of tone, not truth. Used carelessly, it silences. Used consciously, it can be replaced by patience, turning shame into clarity, hierarchy into dialogue. And when the dagger is set down, curiosity lives again. Need, pressure, there is a word we use every day, but hidden inside it is a demand that can bend relationships, twist desires, and trap us in cages of our own making. That word is need. On the surface, it feels natural. We say, I need you to listen. I need this job. I need this relationship to work. But listen closely. When a want is wrapped in the language of need, it changes shape. It no longer feels like a preference or a request. It becomes an ultimatum. Need transforms desire into survival, and in doing so, it creates pressure. Pressure that suffocates trust, intimacy, and even personal freedom. Psychologists call this linguistic inflation, the way we escalate words to give them more weight. Want sounds small, like a luxury. Need sounds essential, like oxygen. But most of what we call needs are not survival requirements. They are wants, wrapped in urgency, sharpened into weapons of persuasion. The moment you say, I need this from you, you've shifted the balance of power. The other person is no longer free to choose. They are forced to carry the weight of your survival, whether or not that survival was ever at stake. Think about a relationship. A partner says, I need you to call me every night. The word doesn't leave room for flexibility, for choice, for context. It is not a preference, not a request, but an ultimatum disguised as vulnerability. If you fail, it is no longer an inconvenience, it becomes betrayal. A friend says, I need you to take my side. A parent says, I need you to make me proud. A boss says, I need this done by tomorrow. Each time, the word frames the situation as life or death. Wants masquerade as needs, and what could have been cooperation turns into coercion. The danger is not only in how others hear it, but in how we hear ourselves. Every time you tell yourself, I need this to be happy, you narrow the possibilities of joy. You set a condition, until I get this, I cannot feel whole. That condition grows roots in your nervous system. Dopamine circuits wire around the goal, and failure to achieve it feels like danger. Anxiety spikes. Stress hormones flood the bloodstream. You aren't chasing a preference anymore, you're running from extinction. Your body doesn't know the difference between needing food and water and needing validation or success. The stress is the same. The cage is the same. Look at how it plays out in smaller moments. A student whispers, I need to get an A on this exam. What was once motivation becomes paralysis. The word builds pressure so high that mistakes feel catastrophic. An employee mutters, I need this promotion. Every interaction with their manager now feels like life or death. A performer steps on stage thinking, I need them to like me. The result is not presence but fear, not joy but desperation. By turning a want into a need, they create an ultimatum for themselves, succeed or collapse. This is why need, pressure corrodes resilience. When you frame something as a want, failure hurts but teaches. When you frame it as a need, failure feels like annihilation. The difference is not in the outcome, but in the story. And stories change everything. They shape hormones, decisions, and identities. The story of need is the story of desperation. The story of want is the story of freedom. But there is another layer. Need language creates dependency loops in relationships. When one person says, "I need you to do this for me," often what they mean is, "I will withhold affection, approval, or peace until you comply." This turns love into transaction, turns care into contract. Over time, the relationship becomes a marketplace of ultimatums. I need you to change. I need you to be different. I need you to meet my standards. Soon, no one remembers what they actually want, only what they fear losing. Affection becomes hostage, and intimacy becomes negotiation. Yet, not all needs are false. Humans do have fundamental needs: food, water, shelter, safety, belonging. These are not negotiable. But the problem begins when we dress every preference in the clothes of survival. When every whim becomes a necessity, we lose perspective. We confuse what sustains life with what flatters ego. We confuse what nourishes with what entertains. And in the confusion, we pressure ourselves and others into believing the world owes us fulfillment. To break free of the cage, we must return to precision. The next time you feel the urge to say, "I need," ask, "Is this survival, or is this desire?" If it is survival, name it honestly. If it is desire, allow it to remain desire. Say, "I want this." Say, "I would prefer this." These words may feel weaker, but they are cleaner. They invite freedom rather than demand obedience. They create space for choice, space for growth, space for honesty. And in speaking differently, you also think differently. The nervous system relaxes when the stakes are lowered. "I want this to happen" leaves room for resilience if it does not. "I need this to happen" leaves only catastrophe. Imagine the relief of rephrasing, from "I need to succeed" to "I want to give my best." From "I need you to understand me" to "I'd like to share what I feel." From "I need to be perfect" to "I want to improve." Each shift unlocks the door of the ultimatum and replaces it with possibility. The word need is not evil, but it is powerful. And like all power, it must be handled carefully. Used wisely, it names the essentials of survival. Used carelessly, it turns wants into emotional ultimatums that corrode trust and breed anxiety. The need pressure is not just a trick of language, it is a trap of perception, one that makes us cling harder, fear more, and suffer longer. So the next time you hear yourself saying, "I need," pause. Ask whether you are naming survival or inflating desire. Notice how often the cage is built not by circumstance, but by a single word that magnifies pressure. Because in truth, most of what we call needs are wants. And most of what we call ultimatums are choices. If you can see the difference, you can reclaim your freedom. And in that freedom, you may finally discover that the strongest relationships, the deepest achievements, and the most lasting joy come not from pressure, but from the space to choose. Clearly, push. There is a word that slips into conversations disguised as confidence but often carries something sharper beneath it. Clearly. On the surface, it sounds like a sign of certainty, a way to emphasize truth. But when used to push a point, it becomes something more dangerous. The clearly push is a subtle weapon of language, forcing agreement by framing dissent as ignorance. Once someone says clearly, the unspoken message is simple. If you don't see this the way I do, then you must be blind, foolish, or uninformed. Think about how it lands. You are in a discussion, trying to weigh possibilities. Then someone says, clearly, this is the only way forward. It sounds decisive, but it shuts the door. To question the point is no longer to engage, it is to risk being labeled ignorant. The word does not prove the argument, it bullies the listener into silence. Nobody wants to be the one who doesn't see what's obvious. So the group nods, agreement is forced, and dissent dies before it can breathe. Psychologists studying power dynamics know this move well. It is a form of framing, a way of setting the rules of the conversation before debate even begins. When you call something clear, you are defining reality itself. You are saying, The facts are already settled. Any disagreement is not a valid perspective, but a flaw in perception. And when this tactic is repeated, it begins to warp the very structure of trust. People stop questioning. They start doubting themselves, even when their instincts are right. The clearly push shows up everywhere. In politics, leaders declare, clearly, the data supports this decision, even when the data is contested. In workplaces, managers say, clearly, this project is failing, shutting down those who might offer solutions. In personal relationships, someone says, clearly, you don't care, turning emotion into a verdict that cannot be appealed. The word feels small, but the impact is massive. It creates an environment where disagreement equals ignorance. And it is precisely in moments of complexity that clearly becomes most dangerous. Real problems are rarely simple. Solutions are rarely obvious. To say clearly in the midst of ambiguity is to deny ambiguity itself, to erase nuance with the sweep of a single word. It's a shortcut to power, one that wins arguments in the moment but corrodes trust in the long run. Why does it work so effectively? Because human beings are wired to fear exclusion. To be the one person who doesn't get it feels isolating. When someone says clearly, they put you in a bind, either agree or risk looking foolish. The curse of the word is that it changes the emotional stakes of the conversation. You are no longer arguing ideas. You are defending your intelligence. And most people would rather surrender their point than their dignity. Yet the irony is that clearly often hides insecurity. People who truly understand complexity rarely need to insist something is obvious. They explain, they invite, they explore. The clearly push often emerges when someone wants control more than clarity. It is a bluff, a way to sound certain when certainty is impossible. So how do you resist it? The first step is to recognize it. When you hear clearly, pause. Ask, is this truly clear, or is someone trying to make it appear so? Then, rather than attacking the word, sidestep its trap. Instead of saying, no, it's not clear, you can say, help me understand how you see it as clear, or, what assumptions are we making here? These questions reopen the conversation without letting the word seal it shut. For those who use it, often without malice, the challenge is to replace it with humility. Instead of, clearly, this is the best option, say, here's why I think this may be the best option. Instead of, clearly, you don't get it, say, I may not be explaining this well, let me try another way. These small changes shift the ground from authority to collaboration. They invite others in, instead of pushing them out. The most powerful ideas do not need to declare themselves obvious. They shine when tested, when questioned, when held up to the light of many perspectives. The clearly push is seductive because it feels efficient, it ends arguments quickly. But what it really ends is curiosity. What it kills is dialogue. In the long run, relationships, teams, and even societies cannot be built on silenced dissent. They thrive on the messy, sometimes frustrating clash of viewpoints. To replace clearly with genuine clarity is to choose connection over control. It is to risk the discomfort of debate in exchange for the richness of truth. So the next time the word rises to your lips, pause. Ask yourself, am I describing reality, or am I forcing it? Because if something is truly clear, it will not need the push of language to prove it. And if it is not, then honesty, about doubt, about nuance, about possibility, will always build a stronger bridge than the brittle wall of a single, overconfident clearly. Listen, command. Think about how a single word can tilt the balance of a conversation. Someone leans in and says, listen. On the surface, it sounds like an invitation. In reality, it often functions as a command, a sudden shift in power that positions the speaker as the authority and the listener as the subordinate. This is the listen command, a word that transforms dialogue into hierarchy, turning what could be an exchange of ideas into a lecture. The psychology behind it is subtle but potent. Listen does not merely request attention, it assumes control. It says, I have the truth, you have the noise. I will speak, you will absorb. It doesn't just guide the ears, it shapes the entire dynamic of the moment. In heated arguments, listen is less about hearing and more about silencing. It's the verbal hand raised to stop your words mid-air, the rhetorical hammer that insists, my voice matters more than yours. Consider how it plays out in relationships. In a conflict between partners, one says, listen, you don't understand. In that instant, the phrase invalidates the other's perspective. Whatever feelings were shared are framed as irrelevant until the speaker has delivered their superior version of reality. The word is not a bridge, it is a boundary. And once invoked, the conversation is no longer about mutual discovery, but about submission to one voice. In professional settings, the effect sharpens. A manager begins with, listen, here's how this needs to be done. The team's role is no longer to collaborate or suggest but to obey. Teachers, politicians, and leaders of every kind deploy it as a shortcut to authority, as though the simple act of commanding attention ensures the legitimacy of their argument. But respect does not flow from force. When listen is used as an assertion of dominance, people often hear not clarity but condescension. The word may silence them in the moment, but resentment grows in the silence that follows. Even in everyday conversation, the word sneaks in as a way to reset the hierarchy. Friends telling stories punctuate them with, listen, you won't believe this. Parents scold children with, listen to me when I'm talking to you. The phrase carries weight precisely because it mimics the primal power dynamic of childhood, when authority figures demanded attention and children had no choice but to obey. Every time the command resurfaces in adulthood, it echoes that learned submission, subtly shifting power away from equality. What makes the listen command insidious is that it masquerades as an appeal to connection. After all, what could be more human than listening? But true listening is an act of humility, not dominance. It begins not with commanding ears but with offering presence. To demand listen is to confuse listening with obedience, to conflate dialogue with monologue. It weaponizes the act of hearing, turning it into proof of power rather than a bridge to understanding. The alternative is simple but radical. Replace the command with curiosity. Instead of, listen, here's what you need to know, try, can I share how I see this? Instead of, listen, that's not the point, try, I hear you, and here's what worries me. The difference is profound. One shuts doors, the other opens them. One enforces hierarchy, the other sustains equality. And equality is where trust is born. The listen command reveals something deeper about human communication. So often, we don't want dialogue, we want dominance. We don't want to understand, we want to be right. Listen is the word we reach for when patience runs out, when we no longer see the other as a partner in thought, but as an obstacle to be overpowered. It is efficient in the moment but corrosive in the long run, because it erodes the very foundation of dialogue, mutual respect. So the next time you feel listen forming on your lips, pause. Ask yourself, am I inviting attention, or am I demanding submission? Am I trying to share, or am I trying to silence? A conversation is not a battlefield to win but a landscape to explore together. Authority cannot be forced with a single word, it must be earned with clarity, empathy, and trust. The command to listen may silence a person's mouth, but it rarely opens their heart. True authority is not built by demanding ears, but by deserving them. And in the end, the most powerful thing you can do is not say, listen. It is to listen yourself. Together, trap. There are words that arrive draped in virtue, words that sound so good on the surface that they are difficult to resist. Few are as powerful, or as dangerous, as together. On its face, it is a promise of unity, of shared strength, of collective action. Together we rise, together we endure, together we triumph. The word sparkles with moral weight, pulling people toward it like a magnet. But hidden inside that glow is a darker function, the together trap. It can be used not to build unity, but to enforce it. Not to empower voices, but to silence them. The trap works because unity is hardwired into us. Human beings survived not by isolation, but by banding together. To be excluded meant danger, to belong meant safety. So when someone invokes together, our instincts respond before our logic does. The word carries the threat of its opposite. If you don't agree, you are alone. When a leader says, we must move forward together, dissent becomes betrayal. When a corporation insists, we're all in this together, any questioning of their choices is painted as selfishness. The word becomes a cage built from belonging. History is filled with examples of this trap. Political regimes have wielded together as a weapon, demanding conformity in the name of unity. Propaganda posters urge citizens to stand together, while punishing those who disagree. Religious institutions have preached that salvation depends on unity, branding skeptics as heretics. Even in modern workplaces, management slogans like, "One team, one vision," can pressure employees to swallow grievances rather than risk being seen as disloyal. In each case, together is less about collaboration and more about control. On the personal level, the trap is just as insidious. Families may tell a struggling member, "We all need to stick together," when what they mean is, "Don't question the choices we've already made." A partner in conflict might say, "We have to be on the same page," not as an invitation to resolve but as a demand for silence. The surface call for unity masks an erasure of individuality, as if disagreement is a crack in the foundation rather than part of the structure itself. What makes the together trap so effective is that it cloaks suppression in warmth. To oppose it feels wrong. Who wants to be the one standing outside the circle? Who wants to explain why they refused togetherness? The dissenter is instantly framed as selfish, divisive, even dangerous. The trap shifts the burden. The group no longer needs to justify its path. The individual must justify why they refuse to follow. And that is the genius of the illusion. It hides power in morality. But real unity is not imposed. It emerges from dialogue, from listening, from difference being allowed to breathe. A chorus does not silence individual voices, it blends them. A team does not erase individuality, it channels it toward a shared goal. When together is real, it feels like choice, not coercion. You know it because unity feels strong, not suffocating. There are ways to test the word when it appears. Ask, what does this togetherness require me to give up? Ask, is my agreement being earned through reason, or assumed through pressure? Ask, does this together allow room for dissent, or does it erase it? If the answer silences you, you are in the trap. If the answer welcomes you, then together is genuine. The together trap is a reminder that language is never neutral. It is a tool, and tools can build or bind. Together can be the foundation of resilience, or the mask of control. The difference is whether it is offered as an invitation or imposed as a command. So the next time you hear the call to unity, let the alarm ring. Listen for the voices left out. Notice the cost of inclusion. Because true togetherness does not demand silence, it thrives on many voices speaking, even in discord, until harmony is built, not forced. Real unity is chosen, not coerced. Anything else is not togetherness at all, but its shadow. Later, delay, later. A word that feels safe, almost responsible. It tells us we're not saying no, we're just postponing, saving the task for a time when we'll be more ready, more focused, more energized. But hidden inside later is a quiet deception. It signals that action will come, while silently admitting it may never arrive at all. It soothes us in the moment, but steals momentum, trapping us in the comfort of delay. Think about how often it shows up. I'll do it later. We'll talk later. I'll change later. Each one promises a future that rarely materializes. Later is seductive because it buys temporary relief. The pressure fades, the decision dissolves, the discomfort disappears. But the cost is invisible tension, a task that lingers in the back of the mind, never gone, never done. You carry it like a shadow, burning energy to suppress it. By deferring action, later creates not freedom, but a low-grade anxiety that follows you everywhere. The brain loves later because it feels like progress without effort. Psychologists call this temporal discounting, the tendency to treat future time as if it were endless, cheaper, less valuable than today. We imagine our future self as stronger, braver, more disciplined than we are now. We picture that version of us tackling the hard task with ease. But the truth is brutal. The future self never shows up. The same resistance you feel today will greet you tomorrow. And later simply resets the loop. This is why later so often turns into never. The call never made. The apology never spoken. The dream project never started. Each time you defer, the likelihood of action shrinks. Momentum decays, enthusiasm cools, and the mind grows accustomed to delay as a lifestyle. You stop believing your own promises. And deep down, you know it. That is why later feels hollow, because a part of you recognizes it as avoidance dressed up as intention. Consider relationships. Someone asks for your time or honesty, and you answer, later. It softens the refusal but sows doubt. Will the truth ever come? Will the moment ever arrive? The word becomes a shield against discomfort, but it erodes trust in both directions. Trust from others, and trust in yourself. Or in work. I'll start the draft later. I'll fix my habits later. Deadlines creep closer, and the later that never arrived turns into crisis. Even in personal life, exercise, learning, healing, later accumulates as regret. The opportunity passes, and you are left holding the silence where action should have been. But later isn't always a lie. It can be a tool if used with precision. The problem is not postponement itself, it's postponement without clarity. Later becomes toxic when it has no anchor. If you tell yourself, I'll do it later, but you don't specify when, where, or how, the brain treats it as permission to forget. But if you trade later for scheduling, I will do this at 5 p.m., after work, for 15 minutes, then later transforms into planned. Specificity turns delay into structure. Vague delay turns it into dust. Another antidote is to shrink the starting point. Instead of deferring the whole mountain, carry one stone now. Write one sentence, send one text, take one breath of action. Once you begin, inertia shifts, and later becomes already happening. Action breeds action. Waiting breeds more waiting. And sometimes, the most freeing move is honesty. Replace later with the truth. I won't do this. That clarity, painful as it may be, clears the fog. It ends the self-deception, frees your mind, and lets you redirect energy toward what you will choose. A hard no is always kinder than an endless maybe. The danger of later is not in what it postpones, it is in what it erodes. It teaches you that your words are optional, that your time is negotiable, that your life can be delayed. But time does not pause for your convenience. Every later is borrowed against a future you cannot guarantee. So the next time later rises to your lips, pause. Ask, if not now, when? If not me, who? If not this moment, will there really be another? Because the truth is simple, life only happens in the now. Later is not a place, it is an escape. And every escape, if repeated often enough, becomes a prison. Because armor, there is a word that sharpens like steel when spoken. It feels logical, rational, commanding. That word is because. On the surface, it seems innocent, even helpful. We use it every day to explain, to justify, to connect cause and effect. But hidden inside is a shield, a weapon we raise against vulnerability. Because is not always a bridge to truth. Often, it is armor, demanding reasons where reasons cannot exist, shutting down emotions, silencing instinct, and forcing the heart to defend itself in the language of logic. Think about how often you've heard it. A child cries out, I'm scared. The adult replies, why? Because what? As if fear must always submit to evidence. A partner says, I don't feel comfortable. The reply comes, why? Because of what reason? Because it doesn't make sense to me. Suddenly the emotion is on trial. The person must justify not only what they feel, but why they are allowed to feel it. Because has turned a moment of openness into a courtroom. This is the danger. Because masquerades as curiosity, but often it is control. It demands the kind of answer that feelings cannot always provide. Emotions are not equations, they are signals. They are rooted in millions of years of survival, in instincts older than language. But when we force them into the narrow channel of justification, we strip them of legitimacy. Anger must become rational argument. Sadness must become provable evidence. Intuition must be dressed as data. Anything that cannot wear the costume of reason is dismissed as weakness. In relationships, the because armor appears everywhere. One partner says, "I need space." The other responds, "Why? Because I didn't do enough? Because I failed you." The focus shifts from listening to interrogation. Or imagine a workplace where someone says, "I don't feel right about this decision." The leader demands, "Why? Because of what numbers? Show me the proof." If the proof is not available, the instinct is discarded. Yet how many times in history have instincts been right long before the evidence caught up? How many disasters could have been avoided if someone had trusted a gut feeling instead of silencing it under the weight of because? We use because not only against others, but against ourselves. You feel restless, sad, or anxious, and the inner voice demands, "Why? Because of what?" If no clear answer arises, the feeling feels illegitimate. You begin to distrust your own body, dismissing signals that don't come with citations. But the nervous system doesn't speak in essays. It speaks in tension, in tears, in racing hearts. To force it into because is to translate poetry into statistics. Something essential is lost. The most unsettling part is how easily because tricks us into compliance. Psychologists once ran an experiment at a library photocopier. People who asked to cut in line with no reason were often refused. But when they added the word because, compliance skyrocketed, even if the reason was meaningless. Because I need to make copies. The same outcome, but the word carried power. People are conditioned to accept explanations, even when the explanation explains nothing. Because becomes not just armor, but authority, closing the door on deeper questioning. And yet, reasons matter. Logic matters. Evidence saves lives. The problem is not because itself, but when it is used to deny what cannot be quantified. Human beings are not machines. We are stories, instincts, emotions. Some truths are felt before they are measured. Some decisions are made in the silence before words arrive. If we demand that every heartbeat, every fear, every hesitation carry a perfect reason, we crush the very part of us that makes us alive. Think of how many lives follow the tyranny of because. A student told they can't pursue art because it doesn't make money. A worker told they can't rest because the numbers don't allow it. A person told their love is invalid because it doesn't look like tradition. Behind each of these sentences is not reason, but rationalization, an armor worn to shield prejudice, fear, or control. The word is sharp enough to cut possibility into pieces. But there is another way. We can learn to hear feelings without demanding their passport of logic. We can allow someone to say, "I'm uncomfortable," and trust that signal without cross-examination. We can let, "I don't know why, but this feels wrong," be the start of exploration instead of the end of credibility. We can remind ourselves that because is a tool, not a requirement, that some truths do not need reasons to deserve respect. The next time you feel tempted to challenge a loved one with, because, pause. Ask yourself, am I seeking to understand, or am I seeking to control? Am I listening, or am I interrogating? And when your own mind demands reasons for every emotion, remind yourself that feelings are messengers, not mathematicians. You do not need to justify being human. The because armor feels safe. It feels rational. But behind its safety, connection withers. Vulnerability retreats. Honesty dies under interrogation. To lower the armor does not mean abandoning reason. It means remembering that reason is only one voice in the human chorus. Sometimes the heart sings a truth the mind cannot yet explain. And when it does, the most powerful thing we can say is not because, but simply, "I hear you." Fix frame. There is a subtle cruelty that often hides in plain sight, a pattern of language that sounds helpful but carries a sharp edge. It is the fix frame, the way of speaking that positions a person, or an idea, as broken, defective, in need of repair. At first it can seem practical, even caring. We talk about fixing problems, fixing habits, fixing relationships. But when that frame is applied to human beings themselves, it reduces them to malfunctions. It quietly erases dignity, and in doing so, it reshapes connection into control. Think of how it feels to be told, "We need to fix you." Whatever the intention, the message underneath is, as you are not enough. It tells the listener that their value lies not in who they are, but in who they might become if only someone corrects them. The fix frame suggests that flaws define the person, that their existence is a set of errors waiting to be solved. And once that frame is established, every action, every word, every choice is interpreted through it. The individual stops being human and starts being a project. We see this often in relationships. A partner says, "I just want to fix the way you react." A parent says, "We need to fix that attitude." A friend says, "I'm only trying to fix your life." None of these may be spoken with malice. They may come from love, from fear, from hope. But the effect is the same. The person on the receiving end feels less like a companion and more like a broken machine. Emotional connection shrinks, replaced by a subtle hierarchy, one person positioned as whole, the other as incomplete. The same pattern appears in workplaces. Leaders talk about fixing employees, fixing teams, fixing mindsets. Rarely do they stop to notice how such language defines people by deficits. Once workers are cast as needing fixing, their strengths are ignored, their creativity smothered, their humanity overshadowed by the presumption of defect. Some of the greatest innovations in history came not from people who were fixed, but from those who were free to explore without being treated as problems to be solved. On a deeper level, the fix frame is seductive because it promises control. To fix is to impose order, to reduce complexity, to resolve discomfort. It allows us to believe we can repair others as though they were clocks with missing gears. But people are not machines. They are stories unfolding, contradictions coexisting, mysteries still being written. To frame someone as broken is to deny the richness of who they are becoming. And the damage does not end with the listener. For the speaker, the fix frame becomes a cage as well. It makes relationships transactional. You offer repair, they provide compliance. It feeds perfectionism, because if others are always broken, then wholeness is never attainable. It creates distance, because intimacy thrives on acceptance, not correction. In trying to fix others, we may quietly be trying to fix our own fear of uncertainty, our inability to sit with imperfection. Consider an alternative. Instead of saying, "How do I fix you?" ask, "How do I understand you?" Instead of, "How do we fix this relationship?" ask, "How do we nurture it, grow it, adapt with it?" Instead of, "This team needs fixing," ask, "What strengths can we amplify, what obstacles can we remove?" These questions reframe the conversation. They treat people not as defective, but as dynamic, capable of learning, of healing, of surprising. To be clear, growth is real, change is necessary, repair is sometimes vital. We all have patterns that harm us, wounds that need healing, mistakes that must be addressed. But the difference between healing and fixing is profound. Healing honors wholeness even in brokenness. Fixing assumes brokenness is the only truth. Healing works with the person as they are. Fixing insists they must first become someone else. The fix frame can sound efficient, but it hollows out trust. A partner who feels like a project will withdraw. A child who feels like a problem will hide. An employee who feels like a defect will disengage. What people need is not to be cast as broken, but to be met where they are, with curiosity, patience, and respect for the complexity that makes them human. So the next time the word rises to your lips, "I need to fix this person, fix this relationship, fix this idea," pause. Ask yourself whether you are responding to reality, or to the discomfort of imperfection. Ask whether what is needed is not repair, but presence. Because sometimes, the greatest gift is not to fix someone, but to walk beside them while they learn to unfold. And in that act, something paradoxical happens. When people are freed from the weight of being broken, when they are trusted to grow rather than repaired to conform, they often change more deeply than fixing could ever achieve. Because growth, unlike fixing, comes from within, and no frame of brokenness is strong enough to stop it. Success weapon. We grow up surrounded by the word success as though it were a compass pointing toward a single, undeniable north. Get the grades, land the job, earn the salary, build the family, buy the house, leave the legacy. This is what we're told success looks like. It is framed not as a choice, but as truth. Yet beneath its shiny surface, the word often hides something darker. Success can be weaponized. It becomes not a marker of achievement but a blade, cutting into personal worth, measuring individuality against standards forged by someone else. This is the success weapon, the silent force that uses society's definitions to judge your value, whether or not those definitions fit the life you truly want. The mechanics of this weapon are everywhere. Parents ask their children, when will you become a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer? Teachers frame intelligence in terms of grades and test scores. Social media floods us with curated images of vacations, promotions, and perfect homes, each one silently whispering, "This is what success looks like. Where are you?" Even well-meaning friends participate. "Oh, you're still single? You're how old and don't own a house?" The implication is clear. Success is a ladder, and if you're not climbing at the expected speed, you are failing. Psychologically, the success weapon works because it strikes at our deepest need, to be seen as valuable. Human beings are wired for recognition. It was once essential for survival. But when value becomes tied to external checklists, life turns into performance. You don't ask, "What do I want?" You ask, "What will they approve of?" Your identity gets outsourced to society's scorecard. Every time you achieve a milestone, the satisfaction is brief, because the goalposts shift. A good job becomes not enough. It must be a promotion. A house must become a bigger house. Success becomes an endless horizon, always just out of reach, ensuring that no matter what you achieve, you never quite feel worthy. Worse, this weapon creates hierarchy. People are sorted into categories, successful and unsuccessful. Those who conform to society's definition are praised, while those who deviate are pitted, mocked, or ignored. An artist who chooses poverty for passion is seen as irresponsible. A parent who stays home rather than chasing career advancement is seen as wasting potential. A person who values simplicity over consumption is seen as unambitious. By this logic, worth is not intrinsic but conditional, granted only when the external scoreboard lights up. Consider how corrosive this is in intimate relationships. Couples compare themselves to their peers, who bought the nicer home, who makes more money, who travels more often. Instead of intimacy built on authenticity, resentment grows from competing versions of success. In workplaces, employees are pushed into burnout, sacrificing health and family because success is defined by productivity. In schools, children learn to chase grades instead of curiosity, reducing education to a race rather than a journey. Everywhere, the weapon cuts by erasing individuality, declaring that if your path does not match the prescribed route, it is worthless. And yet, here lies the paradox. Success has no universal meaning. Across cultures and centuries, it shifts dramatically. In some eras, success was measured by how many children you had. In others, by land, honor, or conquest. Today it might be money or fame. Tomorrow, it may be adaptability or resilience. The very fact that the definition changes proves it was never absolute. It was always a story, written by the dominant culture, enforced by repetition, and internalized until it feels like law. Breaking free from the success weapon requires an act of rebellion, not against achievement itself, but against the illusion of a single path. It begins by asking a different question. What does success mean to me, in my life, on my terms? Maybe success is writing a book no one else will read, but that saves your sanity. Maybe it is choosing peace over wealth, solitude over recognition, family over ambition, or health over hustle. True success is self-defined, not externally imposed. But redefining success is not easy, because the weapon leaves scars. Even when you try to step away, the echoes follow you. You scroll through feeds, overhear conversations, visit family dinners, and feel the sting of comparison. It takes courage to say, I am not failing, I am choosing differently. It takes resilience to hold onto that truth when the world insists otherwise. Yet every person who does so weakens the blade, reminding others that worth does not come from conformity but from authenticity. The success weapon thrives on silence, on people quietly suffering under its weight while pretending they're fine. To speak against it is to expose it, to say out loud what many feel but fear admitting, that we are exhausted from climbing ladders that lead nowhere, that we are tired of measuring ourselves by borrowed definitions, that we crave permission to live lives that look different from the script. In the end, the most dangerous thing about the success weapon is not that others use it against us, it is that we learn to use it against ourselves. We replay comparisons in our minds, judge our own progress, and whisper, I should be further along by now. The world doesn't have to cut us, we do the cutting for it. The only way to disarm the weapon is to stop holding it ourselves, to recognize that worth is not measured by what society calls success but by how closely our lives align with who we really are. So the next time someone asks if you're successful, don't reach for their checklist. Reach for your own. Ask yourself, do I feel true to what matters? Do I wake with a sense of purpose? Am I living in a way I won't regret when time runs out? If the answer is yes, then no definition, no comparison, no judgment can erase it. Because the only real failure is to live by someone else's idea of success and never discover your own. Why? Interrogation. There is a single word in our language that can cut sharper than a blade when spoken in the wrong way. That word is why. On the surface, it is the purest form of curiosity. It opens the door to explanation, to meaning, to cause. A child asks, why, and learns how the world works. A scientist asks, why, and uncovers hidden laws of nature. But in ordinary conversation, why carries a double edge. It does not always feel like a request for knowledge. More often, it feels like an interrogation. Like a spotlight swung into your face, demanding justification. Even when meant with innocence, it often lands with accusation. Imagine you are late for a meeting. You rush in, already apologetic, and someone asks, why are you late? The words might be neutral, but they don't land that way. They frame your lateness not as an event but as a failure, demanding you defend yourself. Or picture a child who spills a drink, and a parent snaps, why did you do that? The child does not hear curiosity. They hear blame. The answer isn't sought, it is judged before it is given. This happens because why implicitly assumes fault. To ask why is to demand cause, but in human interactions, cause is tangled with responsibility. The mind hearing the question doesn't process it as neutral. It hears, justify yourself. This is why a manager asking, why did this happen, can make employees defensive, even if the manager only wants to understand the workflow. The very structure of the word invites guilt before explanation. Psychologists have studied how question framing changes response. Why questions tend to activate defensiveness, while what or how questions invite openness. Why are you anxious? Can make someone shrink into themselves, searching for a flaw. But what's on your mind, or how are you feeling right now, shifts the focus toward description, not defense. The content may be similar, but the emotional weight is entirely different. This is not to say, why has no place. It is essential when truly seeking cause, when probing science, when interrogating mysteries, when holding people accountable for actions that harm. But in personal relationships, in delicate contexts, why too often feels like a hammer where a bridge is needed. Used thoughtlessly, it creates walls where connection could have formed. Think of the subtle alternatives. Instead of asking a partner, why are you upset? Which can sound like a demand to stop being upset, ask, what's weighing on you? Instead of asking a colleague, why did this fail? Which implies fault, ask, what got in the way? Or, how can we prevent this next time? The difference is profound. One makes people guard themselves, the other makes them open themselves. And yet, the why interrogation has power precisely because it pushes. That is why it is so often used by parents, teachers, and authorities. It forces people to account for themselves. The problem is that it confuses accountability with connection. Accountability may demand justification, but trust demands empathy. If we wield why constantly, we erode the ground on which honest answers grow. The lesson is not to ban the word, but to wield it with awareness. Know that every why carries weight. Know that it tilts the listener into defense before they speak. If what you want is clarity without walls, reshape the question. If what you want is accountability, be honest that your why is not curiosity but challenge. In both cases, the word should be chosen, not reflexive. Because why is not just a key to knowledge. It is also a mirror of power. Spoken carelessly, it can shrink someone into guilt. Spoken wisely, in the right setting, it can unlock truth. But it is never neutral. Every why interrogates, even when it whispers. And when people feel accused, they rarely reveal, they retreat. If your goal is to draw someone out, to truly understand, then you may need to put the spotlight down and ask your question in a gentler light. Stay, anchor, stay. One word, heavy with comfort on the surface, but carrying chains beneath. It is often spoken softly, framed as love, loyalty, or care. Stay with me. Stay because I need you. Stay. Things will get better. At first it sounds like devotion, an anchor holding two people together. But an anchor does not only keep a ship safe, it also prevents it from moving. When stay is used to keep someone bound inside pain, harm, or stagnation, it becomes less of a bond and more of a cage. This is the stay anchor, the word that disguises control as care, locking people into situations that quietly consume them. Think of the relationships where it shows up. A partner says, stay, because we've been through so much. The history becomes a chain. Or, stay, because you can't make it without me. That's not love. That's fear weaponized. Parents sometimes whisper it too. Stay close, don't leave, you'll never survive out there. Friends echo it. Stay the same, don't grow, don't change. Each version appeals to loyalty, but underneath it is insecurity, dependency, or even manipulation. The stay anchor promises safety while secretly feeding on your freedom. The danger is subtle, because the anchor hides inside emotions we crave: belonging, love, security. To leave feels like betrayal, to step away feels cruel. You tell yourself, they only want me here because they care. But if care demands your silence, your smallness, or your suffering, then it is not care, it is possession. True care supports your becoming. False care insists you remain, even if remaining destroys you. Psychology calls this trauma bonding, the cycle where attachment forms not around mutual growth, but around control, dependency, or fear. The word stay becomes a shield for harmful dynamics, keeping you locked in with guilt. You may even start telling it to yourself. I should stay. I owe it to them. I owe it to this job, this family, this version of me. The anchor no longer needs to be spoken aloud, it lives inside your head. But here's the paradox, anchors are not always bad. In storms, a real anchor saves ships from being lost at sea. In life, grounding relationships and commitments can give stability. The difference is in whether the anchor holds you safe until you're ready to sail, or whether it keeps you chained when the horizon is calling. The stay anchor becomes dangerous when it denies your agency, when it punishes your movement, when it equates leaving with cruelty. Breaking free from it does not mean abandoning care. It means redefining it. Care says, I want you to stay, but I will still love you if you go. Control says, if you go, you betray me. Care allows growth, even departure. Control demands sacrifice of self. If you recognize the stay anchor in your life, the first step is honesty. Ask yourself, am I staying because I choose to, or because I am afraid to leave? Do I feel free inside this bond, or do I feel owned? Is love here a support, or a leash? These questions pierce the disguise. Once you see the anchor for what it is, you can decide, pull it up, or remain tethered. And if you are the one saying, stay, listen closely to the tone beneath your words. Is your request rooted in fear, in the desire to control, in the dread of being left behind? Or is it rooted in love, willing to endure change, even loss, if it means the other grows? The difference is not in the word, but in the freedom it leaves intact. The truth is, no one owes you their staying. And you owe no one your endless endurance of harm. Love that holds only by force is not love, it is fear wearing a mask. The stay anchor may feel heavy, but anchors can be lifted. The sea is wide, the horizon is waiting, and sometimes the bravest act of care is to let go, or to walk away. Everyone myth. There is a word so simple, so universal, that it seems harmless. Yet when spoken, it carries the weight of invisible armies. That word is everyone. On the surface, it suggests consensus, agreement, truth. But often it is nothing more than a myth, an illusion of numbers used to pressure, to silence, to make you fall in line. Everyone thinks this. Everyone knows that. Everyone agrees. With that single word, disagreement is made to feel like isolation. Resistance becomes rebellion. And conformity slips quietly into place. The power of the everyone myth is that it invokes a majority that may not exist. It tells you that if you stand apart, you will stand alone. Psychologists call this social proof. Our brains are wired to assume that if the group agrees, the group must be right. In ancient times, survival often depended on following the tribe. To dissent was to risk exile, and exile meant death. Even today, the nervous system reacts to rejection with the same alarm as physical pain. So when someone says, everyone believes this, the brain interprets it as more than opinion, it hears it as threat. Agree, or be cast out. History is littered with examples of the everyone myth weaponized. Everyone knows the earth is flat. Everyone supports the war. Everyone agrees this group is inferior. These were not truths, but claims dressed in the language of consensus. By invoking the crowd, those in power bypassed the need for argument. Why bother with evidence if everyone already agrees? The myth becomes self-fulfilling. People conform not because they are convinced, but because they fear being the only one who doesn't. Silence becomes agreement, and agreement becomes everyone. In daily life, the trap is subtler but no less corrosive. In school, a child hears, everyone is going to the party, and feels the weight of exclusion if they stay home. At work, an employee is told, everyone is on board with this decision, and learns that dissent will be seen as defiance, even if doubt gnaws at their gut. In relationships, the phrase, everyone thinks you're overreacting, becomes a knife. The opinion of one person hides behind the phantom voices of many, magnifying its power. One critic becomes a chorus. One perspective becomes law. The myth works because it hijacks two instincts at once, the desire to belong and the fear of shame. Belonging is one of humanity's deepest needs. To be accepted is to feel safe, to be cast out is to feel danger. Shame, on the other hand, is the internalized voice of rejection. When you are told that everyone sees you a certain way, shame flares before reason can intervene. You imagine crowds pointing, laughing, disapproving. Even if no such crowd exists, the fear is real. And fear is enough to bend behavior. But when examined closely, the everyone myth unravels. Who is everyone? 5 people? 50? A nation? Or just the speaker and the handful of allies they claim to represent? Most of the time, everyone collapses into a vague generalization. It is smoke and mirrors, not substance. Yet we rarely challenge it, because to ask, who exactly is everyone, feels confrontational. So we let the myth pass, and in doing so, we grant it power. The danger of this myth is that it erases individuality. It silences the lone voice, the minority perspective, the unconventional idea. Many of history's breakthroughs began with someone willing to resist the supposed consensus. Galileo challenged everyone who believed the Earth was at the center of the universe. Rosa Parks defied everyone who accepted segregation. Innovators, artists and thinkers across time had to pierce the illusion of consensus to reveal deeper truths. The everyone myth is the enemy of change, because it convinces us that resistance is futile before it even begins. But there is a way to break the spell. The first step is to question the word itself. When someone says, "Everyone thinks this," ask, who, specifically? When they say, "Everyone agrees," demand numbers, names, evidence. The act of forcing clarity often exposes the illusion. The second step is to listen for your own use of the word. How often do you say everyone when you mean some people or I? Notice how the myth hides in your own language, shaping your thoughts before they even form. The third step is to recognize that standing apart does not mean standing alone. Often, when one person dares to dissent, others find the courage to admit they never agreed in the first place. One challenge can shatter the illusion of unanimity. The myth of everyone thrives on silence. It needs people to nod, to avoid confrontation, to let the weight of imagined consensus crush their doubts. But the moment one person resists, the spell weakens. Truth does not require everyone. It requires clarity, courage, and the willingness to see through the fog of numbers. So the next time you hear, "Everyone knows," "Everyone agrees," or "Everyone thinks," pause. Ask who. Ask how many. Ask whether this is truth, or just pressure disguised as consensus. Because everyone is not always a chorus, it is often an echo, a single voice amplified by fear. And when you pierce the illusion, you may discover that the crowd was never there at all. Now, trap. There is a word so small, so ordinary, that it often goes unnoticed, yet when wielded with intent, it becomes a trap. That word is now. On its own, it can mean presence, immediacy, attention. But in persuasion, negotiation, and even relationships, it becomes something sharper. The now trap, the pressure to decide, to commit, to act before reflection can breathe. It forces urgency where patience might have chosen differently. It cloaks manipulation in the guise of timeliness. And in its shadow, people make choices that echo for years. Think about the scenarios. A salesperson leans forward, "This offer is only available now." A partner demands, "Tell me right now, yes or no." A leader insists, "We have to act now, or we lose everything." The word is simple, but the weight it carries is immense. To resist feels like risk, hesitation, even betrayal. To comply feels like safety, certainty, belonging. And yet, the cost of rushing is often invisible until long after the choice is made. Psychologists call this urgency bias, the tendency to prioritize immediate action over long-term benefits simply because the clock is ticking. Our brains evolved in environments where delay could mean death, where hesitation before running, before fighting, before choosing shelter could be fatal. That reflex still lives in us, even when the threat is nothing more than a manufactured deadline. The now trap hijacks that reflex, weaponizing biology to override reason. In consumer culture, it is everywhere. Limited time only. Flash sale ends tonight. Act now before it's gone. These phrases bypass thoughtful choice, pushing us toward impulse. Studies show that scarcity and urgency can double or triple compliance. People buy products they don't need, sign contracts they don't understand, commit money they don't have, all because now framed delay as loss. Hours later, regret arrives, but by then the ink is dry. In relationships, the trap is more subtle, but just as destructive. One person insists on immediate answers. Do you love me or not? Decide now. Are you staying or leaving? Say it now. These demands force decisions in moments of fear or fatigue, turning complex emotions into cornered ultimatums. Connection thrives on patience, but urgency starves it, reducing entire futures to a single pressured instant. What is decided in panic often unravels in regret. In leadership and politics, the now trap becomes even more powerful. Crises, real or fabricated, become tools. We must pass this law now. We must strike now. We cannot wait for debate or nuance. Action must come immediately. Urgency silences dissent. It positions caution as weakness, questions as disloyalty. Decisions made under such pressure can alter economies, ignite wars, or dismantle freedoms, all justified by the illusion that delay equals disaster. What makes the now trap so effective is its framing of time itself. It presents only two paths: act instantly or lose forever. It erases the middle ground, reflection, negotiation, alternative options, or even the courage to say not yet. And because no one wants to be the one who missed the moment, the trap catches us again and again. But the truth is this: very few decisions are truly now decisions. A medical emergency, perhaps. A child stepping into traffic. Fire at your back. Those are real urgencies. But most of what is framed as urgent, contracts, purchases, commitments, are manufactured. Deadlines are set to pressure, not necessity. Now is often a mask for someone else's advantage, not your own. How do you resist? First, by noticing the pattern. When you hear now, pause. Ask, is the urgency real or manufactured? What will truly be lost if I wait? The act of pausing breaks the reflex, restoring choice. Second, reclaim time as a tool. Say, I need space to decide. If the offer is gone tomorrow, then it was never meant for me. If this relationship can't survive reflection, then it isn't ready for commitment. These statements are not weakness, they are strength. They expose urgency as a tactic, not a truth. For leaders and partners, resisting the now trap means modeling patience. Instead of saying, we must decide now, say, here's the time frame we're working with, how do we make the best choice inside it? Instead of forcing yes or no, say, let's return to this when emotions settle. Urgency narrows vision. Time expands it. Because in the end, the most important choices, the ones that shape lives and futures, are not made in panic. They are made in reflection, in dialogue, in patience. To fall into the now trap is to let fear dictate your path. To resist it is to reclaim agency, to recognize that urgency is rarely truth, and that wisdom often waits just beyond the pause. So the next time you feel the pull, the pressure to sign, to buy, to confess, to choose now, ask yourself one question: who benefits if I rush? If the answer is not you, then the wisest decision may not be action, but stillness. For the greatest trap of now is not that it forces urgency, but that it blinds us to the power of later. Strong mask. We are told from childhood to be strong. Don't cry. Don't break. Don't let them see you falter. Over time, those lessons harden into something heavier than armor, a mask. The strong mask is the face we wear when we turn resilience into silence, when we confuse endurance with invisibility, when we bury our wounds so deeply that no one can tell they exist. It is praised by society, rewarded by admiration, but inside it leaves the wearer suffocating. On the surface, strength looks like control. You keep moving forward after loss, you keep working through exhaustion, you keep smiling while your insides ache. People applaud you for being so composed, so dependable, so unshaken. You're so strong, they say, as though it were a compliment. But in truth, those words often reinforce the mask. The moment you are recognized for hiding pain, you are pressured to keep hiding it, because now it is your identity. Strength becomes not a resource but a prison. You cannot collapse without betraying the image others have of you. The psychology here is cruel. Humans are social creatures. We want to belong, to be respected, to be admired. So when the world tells us our worth comes from strength, we suppress anything that looks like weakness. Vulnerability, our natural cry for help, our longing for connection, is silenced. Tears are swallowed, anger is muted, grief is locked behind the mask. Outwardly, we are stable. Inwardly, the storm rages louder because it has nowhere to go. The strong mask often emerges most in times of crisis. A parent dies, and you are the one who holds the family together. You don't let yourself break, because you think breaking will make others collapse. You survive trauma, and you tell yourself you're fine, because admitting the depth of the wound would mean reopening it. You face daily struggles, financial stress, loneliness, mental health battles, and you meet every "How are you?" with "I'm okay." Not because you are, but because the mask has become second nature. But strength and silence are not the same thing. True resilience is not refusing to bend, it is bending without breaking. The mask, however, teaches the opposite: don't bend at all. Stand rigid, no matter the cost. And the cost is high. Studies show that those who bottle emotions are more likely to experience depression, anxiety, even physical illness. The mask shields you from judgment, but erodes you from the inside. There is another danger. The strong mask isolates. When you never show your weakness, people assume you don't need help. Friends stop checking in. Family assumes you'll handle it. Co-workers lean on you endlessly, because you seem unshakable. Slowly, the mask becomes self-fulfilling. You are strong because no one offers you the chance not to be. You become the person others rely on, even as you are starved of support yourself. And when, eventually, the weight becomes unbearable and you do break, the shock to others is profound, because they never saw your suffering to begin with. This mask is not worn by choice alone, it is forced onto people by culture. Men are told they must be stoic, that vulnerability is weakness. Women are told to be strong in silence, to carry burdens with grace and not inconvenience others. Survivors of trauma are told to move on, to prove their resilience by never speaking of what happened. Everywhere, strength is praised, but it is a strength defined as quiet suffering. The more silent you are, the more applause you get. The applause becomes shackles. Yet the truth is this: vulnerability is not the opposite of strength, it is part of it. To say, "I am struggling," requires courage. To ask for help requires resilience. To cry, to admit fear, to confess loneliness, these are not failures of strength, they are the very acts that allow strength to be renewed. Without vulnerability, strength is brittle. With vulnerability, strength is flexible, sustainable, and real. Imagine removing the mask. At first, it feels terrifying. People might see your cracks. They might judge, they might pity. But more often than not, they respond with recognition. Because everyone wears some version of the mask. Everyone is hiding something. When you drop yours, you give permission for others to drop theirs. And in that shared humanity, something stronger than the mask is born: connection. The strong mask is seductive because it gives us control over appearances. But it robs us of authenticity, intimacy, and healing. To dismantle it, we must change the story we tell about strength, not as silence, but as honesty. Not as unbreakability, but as the ability to break and still rise. True strength is not hiding your pain, it is carrying it into the light, where it can finally be shared, softened, and understood. So the next time someone tells you, "You're so strong," pause before you wear it as armor. Ask yourself, am I being strong, or am I hiding? And if the answer is the latter, remember this: strength without vulnerability is a mask, but strength with vulnerability is freedom. The world doesn't need you to be unbreakable. It needs you to be real. And real is stronger than any mask could ever be. Responsible chain, there is a word that glows with moral gravity, a word so heavy that few people dare to resist it. That word is responsible. To be called responsible is to be praised. To be called irresponsible is to be shamed. Responsibility is the thread that ties us to family, to work, to community. It carries honor. But when wielded strategically, responsible becomes more than virtue, it becomes a chain. It can bind people into obedience, not because logic or fairness supports the demand, but because duty has been invoked as an absolute. This is the responsible chain, where morality is used as leverage to force compliance. Consider how it works in everyday life. An employer tells exhausted staff, "We all have to be responsible and put in the extra hours." The word makes refusal sound like betrayal, not a healthy boundary. A parent tells a child, "Be responsible and take care of your siblings," shifting adult burdens onto small shoulders. A politician urges, a responsible citizen supports this policy, equating dissent with recklessness. In each case, responsibility is not offered, it is imposed, a chain disguised as virtue. The trap lies in how responsibility feels unquestionable. Unlike words such as fair or honest, responsibility is deeply tied to identity. To reject it feels like rejecting adulthood itself, rejecting morality. No one wants to be accused of being irresponsible. It stings sharper than lazy, cruel, or selfish. And so, when the word is dropped into an argument, it bypasses reason and hooks directly into guilt. You don't ask, does this request make sense? Instead, you feel the weight. If I don't comply, I will be judged as less than worthy. History shows the devastating reach of this chain. Leaders have demanded obedience for the responsible good of the nation, silencing dissent in the name of duty. Churches have invoked responsibility to demand unquestioning loyalty, declaring that faith without compliance is irresponsible rebellion. Even in times of war, soldiers were told it was their responsibility to follow orders, even when those orders shredded morality itself. Responsibility, in those moments, was not a virtue, it was a leash. And yet responsibility, when true, is powerful. It holds societies together. It ensures parents care for children, citizens care for communities, leaders care for the vulnerable. Without it, we collapse into chaos. That is why the responsible chain is so dangerous. It takes what is noble and bends it into control. It uses the shine of duty to conceal the rust of exploitation. How do you tell the difference between true responsibility and the chain? Test it. Real responsibility is chosen, not coerced. It comes with clarity, reciprocity, and shared accountability. If someone says, we are all responsible for meeting this deadline, but the rewards are unequal, the costs uneven, then it is not shared duty, it is manipulation. If someone says, you are responsible for fixing this, but strips you of resources, authority, or support, that is not virtue, it is scapegoating. Responsibility without power is slavery dressed in moral language. Notice, too, the emotional texture. Real responsibility often inspires pride, even when it is heavy. I am needed. I am trusted. I matter. The chain, by contrast, suffocates. It inspires guilt, dread, resentment. If I refuse, I am condemned. That difference tells you everything. One builds strength, the other drains it. The responsible chain thrives because it hides in plain sight. We hear the word and instinctively submit, forgetting to ask the harder questions. Who benefits from this duty? Who defined its terms? Is this truly shared, or is it being placed on me because I can be made to carry it? Only by asking those questions does the illusion crack. Responsibility is real, but it must never be weaponized. True responsibility is an invitation to rise. False responsibility is a command to kneel. The next time the word is used, listen for the chain clinking beneath it. If the request honors your humanity, strengthens your agency, and distributes the weight fairly, then it is responsibility in its purest sense. But if it demands silence, compliance, or sacrifice without recognition, then it is not responsibility, it is control. And control, however it disguises itself, should never be mistaken for virtue. Truth, claim, truth. A word that should signal clarity, honesty, and certainty. But when used as a weapon, it becomes something else entirely. People will say, the truth is, or, I'm just telling you the truth, as though their perspective has stepped out of human subjectivity and into divine authority. But most of the time, what follows isn't objective reality. It's opinion, bias, or interpretation dressed in the robes of certainty. This is the truth claim, the act of declaring one's subjective stance as absolute fact, silencing disagreement before it even begins. The danger of the truth claim lies in its preemptive strike. When someone begins with, the truth is, they position themselves as the keeper of reality. If you disagree, you're not just offering another perspective, you're resisting reality itself. The word builds a wall around conversation, making one side untouchable. Imagine two people in conflict. One says, my opinion is, and the other says, the truth is. The first leaves room for dialogue, the second shuts the door. To argue against the truth claim is to risk being painted as delusional, blind, or dishonest. It's not just rhetoric, it's dominance. We see it everywhere. Politicians thunder, The truth is, our way is the only way. Influencers announce, the truth is, if you're not living like this, you're failing. Even in personal relationships, someone will say, the truth is, you don't care about me, or, the truth is, you're the problem. Notice how the word transforms feeling into decree. I feel uncared for invites conversation. The truth is, you don't care declares judgment. The claim doesn't just state, it condemns. This matters because truth, in its purest sense, is slippery. Objective facts exist, gravity, mathematics, measurable data. But the moment we enter human experience, love, fairness, meaning, morality, truth becomes plural. Different lenses reveal different shapes. What feels true for one person may look false to another. The truth claim ignores this complexity, flattening the world into one voice, one perspective, one verdict. It erases nuance and installs authority. And here's the subtle danger, even when unintentional, truth claims can shame. If someone says, the truth is, you're lazy, or, the truth is, you'll never succeed, the listener is stripped of defense. It's no longer framed as one perspective, it's framed as destiny. The phrase implants itself like a brand, heavy with judgment. People carry these truths for years, mistaking them for reality, when in fact they were only someone else's opinion, loudly delivered, forcefully wrapped. But there's also a personal dimension. We use truth claims on ourselves. The truth is, I'm not good enough. The truth is, it's too late. These are not truths, they are beliefs hardened by repetition. When you declare them as fact, you build a prison around yourself. You stop questioning, stop testing, stop imagining alternatives. The walls of certainty close in, and growth suffocates. The antidote is not to abandon truth, but to name it with humility. Swap the truth is with my perspective is, or my experience has been. These phrases don't weaken your stance, they strengthen it. Because humility doesn't undermine truth, it makes room for more of it. A single perspective can be narrow. A shared dialogue can be rich. Truth is rarely found in the thunder of one voice declaring certainty. More often, it emerges in the quiet space where perspectives overlap, test, and refine each other. The irony is that the people most insistent on claiming truth often fear its fragility. By hammering it down with declarations, they try to protect it. But real truth is not fragile. It doesn't need to be shouted to survive. It can withstand questions, doubts, challenges. It grows sharper through friction, not weaker. What is fragile is ego, certainty, and control, the things that truth claim is really guarding. So the next time you hear, the truth is, pause. Ask yourself, is this fact or perspective? Is it measurable reality, or is it interpretation dressed as law? And when you feel the urge to declare truth yourself, ask, am I seeking clarity or control? Am I naming reality or silencing someone else's? The word truth is powerful, but power can wound when misused. Declared as absolute, it narrows the world into a single line. Offered as perspective, it opens a door to dialogue. The difference is not in the facts themselves, but in the way we wield them. In the end, the truth claim teaches us this. Certainty can be comforting, but humility is liberating. When you release the need to frame your view as the only truth, you allow others to speak, and in that chorus, reality reveals itself in deeper shades. Truth does exist, but it does not need our arrogance to shine. It needs our courage to share, listen, and admit that no single voice can own it. Real gate, there is a word that slices invisible lines between people. It sounds harmless, even noble, but inside it carries judgment, hierarchy, and exclusion. That word is real. We hear it everywhere. Real friends, real men, real women, real artists, real fans. It appears to honor authenticity, but most of the time, it is a gate. A barrier. A way of dividing the world into those who belong and those who don't. The real gate does not merely describe, it defines. It claims authority over what counts and what doesn't, who qualifies and who is dismissed. And once spoken, it creates in-groups and out-groups, carving human identity into fragments. The psychology behind it is powerful. Human beings crave belonging. To be called real is to be validated, to be accepted as authentic. To be called not real is to be exiled. This makes the word dangerous, because it leverages our deepest need for recognition. When someone says, "You're not a real fan unless you know every album," or "You're not a real man unless you act tough," they are not describing truth, they are weaponizing belonging. The gate is built from language, but it feels like law. Think about how the real gate appears in culture. In music and art, debates rage endlessly about authenticity. Who is a real musician? Who is a real writer? The gatekeepers dismiss those who don't fit their definition, as though art requires permission slips. In gender roles, the word becomes sharper. A real man doesn't cry. A real woman sacrifices everything for her family. These phrases don't just exclude, they confine. They chain individuals to stereotypes, erasing the vast spectrum of human experience. In relationships, the real gate poisons intimacy. If you were a real friend, you'd always take my side. If you were a real partner, you'd do this for me. The word transforms love into obligation, authenticity into pressure. The most insidious part of the real gate is that it creates both shame and pride. For those who pass through, being called real becomes a badge of honor. It inflates identity, grants status. For those excluded, it cuts deep, suggesting that who they are is somehow fake, flawed, or unworthy. This dynamic feeds tribalism. Groups define themselves by what is real within their boundaries, dismissing everyone outside as imposters. Politics, religion, sports, even hobbies, all fracture under the weight of the real gate. But authenticity is not something external voices can grant. It is not given by majority vote, by tradition, or by social approval. Authenticity is lived, not awarded. Yet the real gate thrives because people are afraid of losing belonging. We accept definitions handed to us because the cost of exclusion feels unbearable. If real means conforming, then we conform, even if it suffocates us. The tragedy is that in chasing acceptance, we often abandon ourselves. Consider how it works in the mind. When you internalize the real gate, you begin to police yourself. I'm not a real writer because I haven't published. I'm not a real adult because I don't own a house. I'm not a real success because I don't match society's picture. This is self-exile. The gatekeeper doesn't need to stand outside anymore. You've built the gate inside your own head. And every time you tell yourself you're not real, you shrink. The danger of this trap is that it narrows human potential. When only certain paths are labeled real, innovation dies. When only certain emotions are considered real, humanity is mutilated. When only certain people are deemed real, communities fracture. The real gate is not about truth, it is about control. It claims to honor authenticity, but it really enforces conformity. Breaking free requires awareness. The next time you hear someone use the word real as a qualifier, pause. Ask, who built this gate? Who benefits from it? What possibilities does it erase? You'll often find that the gate is arbitrary, built not from truth but from fear, insecurity, or tradition. And when you notice it in yourself, when you hear that inner voice saying you're not real enough, challenge it. Who told you authenticity required their permission? Who convinced you that being alive wasn't enough? Authenticity cannot be standardized. It is not a uniform, not a checklist, not a stereotype. It is fluid, personal, alive. The real gate tries to fossilize it, to freeze humanity into categories, to strip away the chaos and diversity of life and replace it with neat boxes. But human beings are not neat boxes. We are contradictions, evolving stories, changing selves. What is real is not what others decide, it is what you live, breathe, and choose. So the next time someone tells you what a real friend, a real man, a real woman, or a real anything should be, recognize the gate for what it is. An illusion of authority. Step around it. Step through it. Refuse to let it define you. Because the truth is this, You were real the moment you existed. And no gatekeeper, no stereotype, no myth of authenticity has the power to take that away. Freedom hook. There is a word that glitters brighter than almost any other, a word that stirs hearts, topples empires, and sells dreams with irresistible power. That word is freedom. To hear it is to feel possibility unfold, the sense of chains breaking, of open skies ahead, of choices restored. But not all invocations of freedom are honest. Too often, freedom is used not as liberation, but as bait. This is the freedom hook, the promise of release that conceals hidden terms, the lure of autonomy that leads instead to deeper binding. The pattern is ancient. Throughout history, rulers and movements have invoked freedom to rally followers. Fight for freedom. Work for freedom. Buy for freedom. The word becomes a banner, but beneath it, obligations multiply. Soldiers march into wars framed as liberation, only to find themselves bound to new forms of rule. Workers are promised freedom through wealth, only to be trapped in cycles of debt. Consumers are offered freedom through purchase, only to discover that the product comes tethered to subscriptions, contracts, and surveillance. The hook is always the same. What looks like open skies hides invisible strings. Consider advertising. A car company says, "Drive into freedom." The image shows empty highways, vast landscapes, total escape. But the fine print binds you to 5 years of payments, insurance, maintenance, and the endless cost of fuel. A bank says, "Financial freedom starts here." The offer is a credit card, freedom to spend, but shackled to interest rates that double the cost of every choice. A tech company says, "Freedom to connect." But the connection comes with monitoring, data tracking, algorithms shaping what you see. The word glows, but the hook digs deep. Politics is no different. Leaders declare, "We fight for freedom." But the fight often brings surveillance, taxation, conscription, or new restrictions disguised as protection. Citizens are told they are free, but their freedoms are defined, narrowed, and conditioned by terms they never chose. The freedom hook works because it exploits the deepest human desire, not safety, not wealth, but the ability to choose. By promising choice, the hook disarms suspicion. By concealing cost, it tightens control. Even in personal life, the trap appears. A partner says, "I'll give you the freedom to do what you want, if you prove you really love me." A boss says, "You'll have the freedom to manage your time, if you meet impossible deadlines." The freedom offered is never unconditional. It is always conditional, always bound to hidden terms. At its worst, the word becomes emotional blackmail. You are free, as long as you choose the option that keeps me comfortable. Why does the hook work so well? Because freedom is not only a political or economic state, it is an emotional state. To feel free is to feel alive, unbound, dignified. We crave it so deeply that we often overlook the details. The promise of liberation triggers hope strong enough to eclipse caution. The word itself blinds us, because we want it to be true. And yet, real freedom is rarely granted by others. It is not handed down in contracts, sales pitches, or political slogans. Real freedom is claimed, through awareness, through boundaries, through the courage to refuse the hook. To resist the trap, we must ask, freedom for whom, and at what cost? If the promise of freedom comes with conditions, then it is not freedom, it is leverage. If the freedom vanishes the moment you stop complying, then it was never freedom, it was bait. This is why the freedom hook is so dangerous. It warps our deepest value into a tool of manipulation. It convinces us that we are escaping while we are, in truth, being bound more tightly. The car payment, the data harvest, the political compromise, all dressed in the costume of liberation. And once we are hooked, the word itself becomes harder to trust, which is perhaps the deepest wound of all. The way out is vigilance. Pay attention to the small print, to the hidden terms, to the unspoken costs. When someone offers you freedom, ask what chains are being exchanged for it. When a leader promises liberation, ask what obedience will be required. When a company sells freedom, ask who profits if you buy. Because freedom, real freedom, cannot be sold or granted, it can only be lived. The irony is sharp. The more urgently someone offers you freedom, the more carefully you should look for the hook. True freedom does not beg, or pressure, or entice. It does not require you to sign, to swear, to sacrifice yourself to hidden terms. It simply exists, when you have the clarity to claim it. And once you see the hook for what it is, the word itself regains its power, not as bait, but as birthright. So the next time you hear the promise, freedom to drive, freedom to spend, freedom to fight, freedom to choose, pause. Ask yourself not how sweet the word sounds, but what chains might be waiting just beneath it. For the most dangerous prisons are the ones disguised as liberation. And the sharpest hooks are the ones baited with the promise of freedom.